This will be a budget workshop, June 1st, 2020. I want, Erica, if you will, where we left off last, we were talking about cash balances. We had it originally at 0. If you can just show where we currently are at. I think that was something that we had discussed. And then as we move forward, if there's anything that you guys want to discuss directly, or we can go into the receipts or the expenditures. It doesn't matter which.
Okay. I'm going to steal your, I'm sorry. Okay. So at the last meeting, to have the first reading that we had for the May 1st deadline, you all had me put in some beginning balances so that the budget, the way it was, would balance. And so after that meeting, I went about making calculations for beginning balances to get a more accurate figure instead of just plugging a number in to make it fit. And so the way that I did that was that I took what the current ending balance for this year would be. I added in any anticipated receipts that we had not received yet. I took out any anticipated expenditures based on asking department heads for what they think they would spend by the end of the year. As far as contracts that they had that they know they had to pay a monthly portion on, utilities, items that had already been spent but had not had an invoice yet, and then anything else they knew that was going to be spent that was not part of the spending freeze. And then I estimated salaries for the end of the year too, and I took that out. So that's how I came up with my beginning balances. I tried to go conservatively on most of them. There were a few that the way the budget was set up at the time, there's less cushion, and others have, a moderate amount of cushion. So I would say most of them are really spot on. Of course, as things come up and people ask us to spend more money and it gets approved, and those are not part of that list that the department heads first gave me what they thought they were going to spend towards the end of the year. That's going to fluctuate that a little bit. So these are my best estimates, and I think that they're pretty on course with what they should be as far as what they'll end up being. If they come in over, great. If they come in under, not great, but we'll figure it out. But I think that they're good estimates at this point in time. And you can flip through and see those. They're all highlighted on your receipts side in a light gray color. It will show up to you all. It's always 4901 under every receipt budget. That's the code, so just the first two numbers depend on what department you're in. But you can kind of scroll through or look through, flip through, and see those. And I'll put it up on the TV here in just a second. But I know how hard it can be with trying to look at this on a monitor when everybody doesn't read the same speed, and some people are looking at one thing. And so I thought printing would take that out of that problem out of the equation.
All right, thank you. All right, where y'all want to start? Does it matter?
Oh, sorry, I should say, as it's handed to you right now, this is a balanced budget. The receipts and the expenditures, they match one another. All of the funds match one another. As I was going through and looking at stuff, and some people have asked some questions about how their budgets have changed, and, of course, as I was going back and rechecking, and then when we sent the first reading of the budget we did on May 1st, last year's budget, there were a couple of funds that the receipts didn't match the expenditures. We didn't catch it, and DLD didn't catch it. So there are a couple of things, like as things come up, there might be a little bit difference there. And if, for example, the road fund was off a little bit, receipts and expenditures last year. The receipts were under expenditures by like 17 grand. So last year you guys should have either increased the receipts by 17 grand or you should have cut the expenditures so that they matched, and that just didn't get caught. So when you look at something and you're like, oh, that got cut by this amount of money this year when you're looking from last, keep in mind that part of it might have been a small part usually that last year wasn't balanced, and so if it had been, the cut might be a little different, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, I can explain it to you more as we get to those items as they come up.
Why don't we just go ahead and start with receipts?
What do you guys want to talk, how do you want to discuss this? I'm assuming that you don't want to go line by everything.
Yeah, I mean,
in
the
receipts,
only,
but-
so, let me get to receipts here. Of course, I had all my notes, just like last time, on the budget before, and so, it's gonna be a little bit different based on this revised budget that we got Friday afternoon, so. So your garbage tax, all you did there was switch it to an individual line under the road department. Because that is used solely for roads.
Right, it
So,
used to
right.
be a line under, the general fund, and it just got moved over to the road fund, since it is
Okay.
used for roads.
And it's used for roads, but also hazmat, and that's where hazmat 1 would be funded out of. If there were to be a hazardous incident, that's another thing that those funds can be used for.
And if you were to look at the expense side of the road fund, you would see that exact dollar amount in a line that says hazmat. So that is, everything in for the garbage tax is right now budgeted as an expenditure as a hazmat line.
So that's not 60,000 we can use in the road fund, though. It's set back in case we have an accident.
No, 12.5 is what hazmat 1 is funded for. So say the landfill has a hazardous incident. Material that's dumped there becomes a hazardous incident. Hazmat 1, the fiscal court will have them show up and contain until, obviously, when you go into that contract, that was a lengthy host agreement, but there's a lot of insurance monies available to bring in bigger companies to clean it up. But those funds, when you look at the statute, is hazmat, cleanup of roadways, and then actual paving of roadways.
Yeah, that's what she's asking. That's what you're
Yeah.
asking though, right?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
is-
but
There's not a
not-
specific percentage that has to be held back for hazmat or?
No, the statute just says those 3 areas. Hazmat 1 is who we budgeted for to actually, if we do have a hazardous incident, they will come in and contain it.
So in the past, we've not, I mean, this is the first year we've done this, right? So we haven't separated out that
That's
money.
right.
We've just stuck it in the general
It
fund.
was
haven't
always
we?
thrown in the general fund
Yeah.
and used wherever.
So,
So we put it into the road department so that it would be specifically under the road department because it pertains to roads. Majority of it pertains to roads.
Right, but it won't be this for us to use, right? It'll just be if there's a hazardous,
No, the hazmat 1, we've got budgeted at 12.5.
That's their yearly cost.
That's their
Okay.
yearly
So
cost.
Of the 60,000, 12.5 goes to hazmat 1 is an agency. We
Okay.
pay them, and then the rest
Okay.
of it is into your.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're not seeing the full year of that increase in that percentage. We're just putting 60 in there based off of the previous year. So I think, did we ever get May's receipts were like half, well, the quarter before, you could see an increase of what that percentage is, but May last year compared to the previous quarters was higher. So we anticipated a higher receipt for this year. But we didn't get it, so we just put last year's. That's why you're seeing 60,000.
okay.
But yeah, whatever the receipts are, those funds will be used for cleaning up the roadways or actual paving of the roadways. We were trying to keep those monies consistent with the statute.
so your court rental, have you received Since we haven't seen anything, but you've received something showing the court rental?
For the judicial center.
Okay. And that's it?
Yeah, and it's in here underline.
Yeah, I got it. 245,
Yeah.
that's why I was asking if it was based off of just guessing or if we
just,
had the document.
in the past, it's always been 90% of whatever the document shows, and so I just stuck with that this year, 90% of that.
Have you ran any numbers on the garbage tax? I know we went from 2% to 5. So
Yeah, that was what
should
Judge
be-
was just
and
talking
then
about. We've seen a little
6.25 for out of county, so there should be a pretty substantial difference in that 62.
We've seen a little bit of an increase in that. The way it's reported to us, it doesn't look like there's tonnage on it, right? Didn't we look at it and there's more dollar figures instead of tonnage, but it has gone up a little bit. That's what Judge was just talking
Yeah.
about.
We signed that in late fall, so we won't see the full year of those quarters, and we've yet to get May's numbers in, so.
So they're not providing us with tonnage?
Yes, not that I can, not based on the way I look at the remittance that they give us with a check. No tonnage. It's dollar amounts that they show us.
I would certainly think they should be.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a legal question, if they're supposed to show the tonnage. I think they should. Yeah, you can see in what they have submitted, the numbers from last year, they're higher than previous years.
We can send a letter from the fiscal court asking for tonnage, and I'll ask for back historical data too. Hopefully they can get us that. It will change when our usage changes, yes.
But that only does, they look back a year, so the occupancy for the past fiscal year was 90-something%. So when they come back and do it again, it'll go down. Unless we can get somebody else to rent it.
Do you all have specific receipts you want to go through, or just kind of a general overview of all of it? How about I'll just start talking when you guys have something you want to talk about, you interrupt me. So the general fund is what's first on your receipt listing. And you can see what I guess the cash balance to be, or estimated to be. It's 971. And we are going to have a beginning balance in our investments. I just separated those out in the past. I think they've been lumped together, and that way we could see better what's investments and what's not. It has, the general fund also has occupational transfers in, occupational tax of 2.1. I'm trying to think if there's anything new or different in the general fund as a receipt that we're not used to seeing.
I think those two that we just talked about are probably the two major other grants that aren't there anymore. I mean,
The road fund, cash balance, I have set at 300,000. That's one of the ones that's there's less cushion there, because I needed all of it. So that's spot on what I estimated it to be. I was right at 300,000. And then the transfers into occupational taxes at 623. Garbage taxes in there, it usually is not, or it has not been previously in the past. It does look a lot different from last year for a couple of reasons. One is we had held over discretionary funds, 600,000 to pay and Hauser, and I can't remember the other one.
It was Hauser, the bridge.
Oh,
and-
The bridge and
Bridge and the paving.
paving.
Okay, there we go. So that we don't have any discretionary monies budgeted in this year. There's one big difference. Onto the jail fund, there's not any big differences from last year as far as something we're not receiving or something we are that we haven't in the past. Cash balance on it, 155, transfers in 436. The grant fund, I have at 0. 911, cash balance 16.5, transfers in, 452, 880, and that's another one where the cash balance is basically right on spot.
Let me stop you.
Sure.
What's the justification, or whatever you want to call it, behind the fairly large as a percentage anyway, decrease in their fees, on landline fees? I mean, I understand that it's going down, but if you just see the way that it's gone down, that's a pretty big.
Right, so we looked at kind of the historical of how it had gone down and then consulted with that department head, and that was the receipt number that we thought was a conservative amount. Of course, that's something that if you guys want to change, that's something that you all can vote on or whatever, however that process works now to change it. But that was with consulting the department head and having the opinion on what.
You have a current
he
number
foresees.
on that?
I just have it through 3/31, but I can get it for you and email it to you if
I'd
that's.
like to get all of them, actually.
Okay. Okay, down to occupational tax. This is where the big change is that we decreased the occupational tax revenue to 4.2. That was something that we talked about doing based on going back to the last kind of economic decline that we saw and what they did then as far as a percentage of a decrease, and we kind of modeled after that. Of course, that's something you guys can discuss.
So let's talk about that. You modeled it after 2008, right?
Yes, we went back to 2008 and kind of looked and seen,
So let me ask you
How it was
this, then, which is, it's a different time.
right,
I mean, that was a longer-term issue, you know, it was not just like what we have right now. So I understand going back and looking at that as a guide. I don't think it's a perfect guide by any means, but can you tell me off the top of your head what 2007 was in relation to 2008?
no, but I could find it out for you
Okay.
guys if you want me to.
I mean,
No, I don't know off the top of my
I
head.
think it makes sense if we're going to use 2008 to know what 2006 and 2007 was. If it was 4.6 million and it went down to 4.2 million, then I feel like 4.2 right now is probably not a fair. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
I understand what you're saying.
because
There
we're
was
at-
just, we didn't know what else to do. We just thought that was our
Yeah.
best option as far as looking to see what had happened historically.
And I understand that, but I do think it's important to know what the year or maybe 2 years prior to 2008 was, because I think that's a different economic situation than we're in now, in my opinion.
And I think it's safe to say, Monty, that yes, they totally different economic situation, but I think the reduction in the OTA is at 900,000 right now.
900,
Roughly.
you're right, 900 budget to budget.
Yeah, so we just have to decide as a fiscal court is what is safe going into this next fiscal year.
Yeah.
You know, we can go back and spend a lot of time looking at 2007, 2008, 2006, but going into this next fiscal year, what does the court think is a safe approach going into this budget?
What is our current number on that? I know last time we asked, it was nearly 6 million.
Yeah, I sent it to you guys. I think it was on Friday, right? And it was
Well, it's probably last
Thursday or
Friday.
Friday? Okay. I think it was like 5.7 at the time, if I remember correctly. I could pull up the email.
Last year's?
No, where we're at right
This
now.
year.
So if you look at that, like I say, 5.7 as what we would get in a year, then you're looking at about 1.4 that we get every quarter. So thinking about the payments that we will receive in July for the March, April, May quarter, if we were closed in April and May, I'd say that's about 2/3 of the quarter that we could expect to be really affected, at the very least. So 2/3 of that 1.4 is about $1 million. So I kind of did that as a second check of whether I thought this was reasonable when we were putting this together. And so that kind of made me think that it is. Of course, that's one person's
Yeah.
opinion of how it can be, so.
Yeah, and you're assuming everything is shut down.
Right.
That's a
You're
big
exactly right.
assumption.
We
You
have,
know,
we have,
And net profits is based on what happened last year. So
Yes.
that we will feel the effects of that next year. So when we go to do the budget again next year, we're gonna need to think about it then too.
Yes.
we obviously have some businesses that'll never reopen, unfortunately. But
Right.
we've also had several that, strange enough, have excelled
Yes,
through this time.
that's right.
Crazy, but good for them.
So can you give me the percentage of the total occupational tax that is net versus payroll? Do you know? I mean, is it,
That is all on an old software program.
Okay.
We switched to QuickBooks, this year, so I could not pull it up for you right this minute, but I could if you gave me time to go back in my old software.
yeah.
It's only on one computer
I
downstairs.
mean, I think it'd be good. I think it'd be good to know
Okay,
that too, just to, but, I mean, you're talking about I get the budget to budget, that it's 900,000, and so that, but I'm really trying to realistically think about it as actual to budget. So you're looking at, say, 1.6, so. You're looking at a 31% decrease assumption in OTA.
And that's not even with everything in. Who knows? That's an unknown, but until July,
Oh,
what's coming in, because the
yeah.
extension was till July 15th.
Yeah, but
I know it's not going to be a large
Still.
number, but
It should be the same as the last previous meetings.
what?
What we've got, we haven't changed the OTA.
Yeah. Understand that. But also, at that time,
Well,
we
we
were
we
at 4
had,
point.
well, we had the OTA receipt, the 31% you're talking about. We also had cash balances at 0 too. So it was a very aggressive conservative budget.
Yes,
And I believe
I agree with
the
that.
cash balance being 0 was the concern.
It was a concern. All right, we can move on.
I'll talk about the last page of receipts, and then we can come back and talk about the occupational tax set if you guys want to some more, and that way we'll kind of just give a little brief overview of everything. The animal shelter donation fund, we have the beginning balance set there at 30,000. I don't have any donations estimated there. That's what we've always done in the past. That's that fund that we voted this year to bring under our budget to satisfy audit findings. It was in the past, it was not really a part of our financials. We have the sheriff in his own fund, it's 79, Fund 79. And we have his fee pooling set there, and then his transfers in of 1 million. And then would represent occupational tax.
Okay, can we stop
Sure.
again on the sheriff's? So, give me is that 375 because you took out the the school resource payment from the high school, and it's in general fund, so is that 370, that 375 is only decreased because of that, correct?
Right, and that's, so that's set at 1.6, less the 375 that's part of the school resource officers. Eddie has expressed to me he would like that to be 1.8, and I can certainly change that if that's something that you go out, end up voting on or voting to change. We chose 1.6 because it's more in line with what we see historically, when you look back at actuals. But again, that could be something that you all discuss.
County police, then that all is a moot point, the fee raises, because the fee raising was because of the additional SRO fees we were getting from the school, so.
So back to 1.6 is more, or around 1.2 without any school resource officers?
Off the top of my head, probably.
Probably close,
Yeah.
okay.
The 375 is what the school has committed to fund school resource officers. And so what I did, is I put 375, if the school is going to fund 375 for school resource officers, then we're providing a resource that is for basically 375,000. You'll see, we put together, I had Emily go through and put together the total cost for that resource. It's about $114,000 more than what you're seeing here. So we can get into the details of Senate Bill 1 and how that was laid out for that resource for the schools, and different schools across the state are doing different things. But sitting down with Trent, they have dedicated $375,000 to the actual funding of school resource officers. It's costing us more. By the way, I think the term that was used was the bureaucratic layer of this is costing the taxpayers more in this resource. And if you look at, the way we looked at it is if they're funding it, then we put that funding in the budget, provide that resource, and if it's 175 days, as far as the contract, that's the terminology that you'll hear, then budget for 175 days. Does that make sense?
I mean, I'm sure we'll get into the whole difference in
Sure.
in what you're wanting to look at, so I don't think with receipts. I mean,
Well,
I understand that that's what their commitment is, so as far as the receipts are concerned, I don't know. I guess we'll talk about the change when we get to the expenses.
Okay.
Okay, the last two on here are ABC and alcohol. ABC had cash balance 130, no transfer in. Those, the regulatory and license fees, they're set at what we had last year. We can change that if that's something you all decide to do. I think the regulatory fees are maybe spot on, but the license fees, there's a big jump this year. I don't know if you have a reasoning for that. Are there a lot of new businesses
So I
needing
think it is what
licenses?
it is, yeah.
Okay, and then the building fund, cash balance July 143, no transfers in.
Can we stop there?
Sure.
So, y'all, you feel like it's gonna be that large of a decrease in commercial?
It's very hard to tell.
Yeah.
What is going to be happening. As far as the commercial land's going, we talked with commercial contractors, they're ready to see what is out there. Not as much work is out there right now. It can change.
Yeah.
We've seen just a slight decline in starts, but it's very slight. So we were actually kind of shocked in that part. We projected a very significant decline through this time period, but we haven't seen
Yeah. So, I mean, because we're essentially looking at what a, 10, 20, I mean, you're looking at 30, another 30% decrease essentially? Is that what we're projecting on receipts?
And that is all based upon the permits that are brought in. So
Right.
construction slows down, permits slow down,
Yeah.
and the work that the office does slows down as well.
But you're comfortable with the 30% decrease?
That was based upon just our numbers that's, coming down
Yeah.
just a little bit.
Okay.
If, different between our department is, if the fees brought in go up, then, expenditures, it's fluctuating.
Right. Yeah. But as long as, I mean, if you're comfortable with it,
And Casey, was that the board when you say we?
No, now, the board has not had any input because our board meeting was canceled during this time.
Who's we?
I guess when we were going over stuff in the budget.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure that it's clarified, yeah.
When's the board meeting again, Casey? I don't know. Things are okay. We could conduct our meetings as normal.
Do you have a current number on the commercial? A current number on the commercial inspections as of 3/31, it was 75.9. We got that budgeted at 23.
I do not have, I can find that out for you.
Okay. That'd be great.
All right, you guys ready to talk about the big sheets, the expenditure side? Okay, let's see. Of course, the general fund always comes first. I don't know if you all are wanting to go line by line through this whole 19-page document. I'm gonna assume that we'll talk about the ones that you wanna talk about as they come up. You guys can just stop us.
Go through department,
Okay,
just, obviously mine's the first department. Are there any questions on that? Then we can just move on to each department.
okay. The second department on here is the county attorney. There's very little room to move there, mostly salaries, right?
All salary.
County clerk, also salaries and a few other items. The office of the coroner, I'm trying to think if there were any big changes there.
The main one was the court agreed to the $600 a month rent.
Yes.
where is that? I didn't see it in the last one.
I don't see
it in
it.
this one either.
And we put it in.
Is it the new equipment or something? Is that,
I wonder if it's under fiscal court.
Oh, we might have put it under
Building
fiscal
lease.
court.
there's not a building lease on Office of County
It was on the
Coroner.
one that was emailed to us.
Huh?
It's on the one that was emailed to us for the coroner.
It was under coroner?
It's not on this one that she just
I think the
printed
total,
out.
Yeah, coroner building lease, item number 16. $7,200.
we have a 6 building lease under
Well, right here.
another, yeah.
Let me make sure it didn't end up somewhere else.
Yeah, I think it-
3150.
I think it ended up somewhere.
Yeah, this should be the most updated one. But, we put it in there. It could have fallen off somewhere. I don't know how I would have, but yes, I can go back and make sure it gets on there. It may have been, we thought about putting it under a different line and it fell off. Okay, I have a note for that one. And we will probably find things like that as we're going through. There's hundreds of lines on this, and I will have to, before our second reading, go back through and double check all formulas, all calculations, and that everything's in there. So we will probably find these items as we go through. Okay, you gonna look and see if you notice it anywhere as we're going? Okay. Fiscal court. I can't think of any thing that stands out to me that's a big change, other than we do have our bond debt service in there.
You can, I've already hit that year, so if you want to take that out, and I can, even if I hit it during this year, I can wait until
On
the
your
next
training?
budget year if you want me to.
It's up to you guys. Is
I
that what
mean,
you want me to do?
I've already hit that years and been paid for it in this one, so I can just, even if I get to it, I can just wait and put it on the next budget. Just remember, we'll just remember that if it comes through, not to pay it until,
I think if it comes through, we're still held under the 30 days of paying you within 30.
oh, you are?
I would think so, yes.
Oh,
Which, do
well,
you request that it's done? You guys
No,
don't
you
request that
don't
it's done. They
request,
just say,
you
oh,
just-
it's done, and they generate a letter.
Yeah. Once
Okay. Well,
DLG gets the
then
number,
I guess you have to leave it in there then. never
Okay.
mind.
yeah.
Which that is a little those numbers are a little different because, Judge let me know that, you all had an extension of time to finish this year's training into next year. So there's a couple of you that it could hit that you end up finishing this year's and doing next year's all in 1 year. So I did, account for that in case that happens.
Oh, well, then maybe you could at least you could just take off one that's already been paid then, maybe. Might just look and see if. that's
Yeah,
in
because
there.
I could try. I mean, one is not, it's
not
not
gonna
a
make a
huge
big
difference.
difference,
It's
but-
probably.
Well, just leave it then.
Okay, the PBA is, salaries, salaries in there, and then our statutory contribution, and that was, given to us by the PBA, so that's a correct number there. The next is the county treasurer's budget. I'm trying to think if there was big changes in there. I did move over, oh, no, I forgot about that. So,
Let me stop you.
yes,
You moved on to the PBA before one I had.
Oh, I'm
a
sorry.
question. Just on the, Brad, you can maybe answer this. Are we at our max where we're not gonna do anymore as far as the lease? I was thinking 180 was like that was gonna be on that schedule, or at least. You know what I mean? I mean,
Enterprise.
like, we started on that schedule. Are we at the?
Yeah, we're pretty much there.
Okay.
What you'll find is, in the next few years, a lot of those leases will fall off, and they'll sell those vehicles and put that equity back into basically our account for those lease items. And I know I think we've sold, or we're gonna sell some sheriff's vehicles maybe, and put that back into that line, so we'll amend that when that comes back in. And I think we actually have a budget amendment tomorrow for, like, insurance payments for vehicles, lost vehicles, and all that will go back into that line too.
Okay.
But we should be right on what we're budgeting for that now.
Okay.
okay, we went through that one, we talked about that one. Okay, the law librarian section or court system section, which is the law library, that's, basically unchanged. Election expenses, we have changed that based on Tim's recommendations, for what will be, what election will be held in that fiscal year and what he anticipates needing. So, we base that on his, information on that. Economic development, there's not big changes there.
Can I stop you there? Sorry.
Yeah.
Back to the county court clerk. So our actual expense is not gonna go up because of all I mean, we're obviously not gonna have the same amount of election officers, right? So that's the reason that we went down on that. What about the ballots and instructions being half that? Is that also because of not as much in person?
Well, I will say, we
But-
had this conversation with him before,
COVID.
yes, at the very beginning of
Okay.
COVID, and I think he anticipated everything being back to normal. So this may be something that we want to revisit with him, now that he sees that there's going to be a lot of
I would-
paper voting.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
you've
would
got, you've got to
certainly
pay,
think-
you got to pay employees for an entire
The
month now,
employees.
because they're doing it all through
Is where
June.
he was gonna pull those monies from for postage.
I think yes, he did, I think he made some changes for this fiscal year, but then I think they gave us next fiscal years before he really knew that he was going to be mailing everything.
These budgeted dollars, if I remember, were for 2 elections. Next fiscal year, we only have 1.
Is there no mention of state reimbursement on any of this, Erica, with the mail-in?
I know that Brad's been looking into how the COVID reimbursements are going to be done.
Yeah, so with that, is it the CARES Act? Yeah, so we got an application to submit all COVID-related expenses, for reimbursement. So right now, I've sent an email out to all department heads, to give me all expenses that are incurred for that. And once I get all that, then we could submit an application for it. The other thing is, we need to keep track of those expenses through December 30th, because that's when the timeline is. So I'm assuming you can go ahead and submit an application now with what you've already expensed for COVID, and then again later, if it's going to go through the 30th of December.
Has it been determined what our maximum amount would be? I know it's going to be divided between cities and counties, and then they were holding out 50 million for some unknown reason.
No, I don't know. I don't think it states in there specifically what the max is. I think you'll probably gather all that information, and then they vet those. But
Okay.
I thought each county could find out what your max.
You could, maybe, I don't know. I haven't
There's,
looked in that. far.
I
KCO
think
put
so.
out and Brad probably hadn't seen it, KCO
Yeah.
had put out a projected amount divided amongst all the counties, but it's really going to come down to each individual county as far as how they're affected.
Oh, they didn't give you a county by county. They didn't give you a county max. They didn't say Marshall County's max would be this. Is that what you meant?
No.
They just said, here's what the total amount.
No, they had the amount of monies that are coming in, they put out what each county
Oh, okay.
basically get. So, and I'll try to pull that email, so that we can see exactly what we would be eligible for. But it's gonna come down to each county as far as, population, I'm sure, and what, effects happen in their counties. But it's, for us, I mean, we put it out to all the department heads, trying to figure out for the county. Now, when you say county, it may be the health department, it may be other resources in the county. But for us, I mean, the departments, the information was put out for them to identify where. We do have some departments, obviously, that are going to be affected greater than others, but.
I still would wonder, I mean, from him. For me, I think I don't know. Maybe it won't be any different.
Let's see, the courthouse administrative, there we have all the janitorial.
Hang on.
Oh, yep.
Economic development.
Yes.
So we did put some office supplies back in there. So I guess Josh is here, the supplies and travel, is that? You can deal with it?
I'll work with whatever you guys need. I mean, we've been on a path of pulling back our dependence on the general fund for travel and supplies for quite some time. So, I mean, it's obviously very helpful because we're still new in a lot of our initiatives, but I mean, I'll work with whatever you guys put in there.
To follow up on the allocation, it's $1,058,000. Is based off population. And it specifically states expenses incurred from March 1st, December 30th, 2020. Costs are necessary expenditures incurred due to the COVID-19 public health emergency, and expenses were not accounted for in the FY 2020 budget.
Okay, so we were talking about courthouse administrative. I'm trying to think if there was any big differences or big changes, and I can't recall any.
So, so the things that we're only talking about the 5080 stuff, is that what you're? is that
Yes,
where you are?
5080, mm-hmm.
Like I wonder, are any increase that you have to take on in custodial?
Do like cleaning.
Yeah.
We haven't, there hasn't been a significant amount of, I mean, they've always done a really good job on sanitation, sanitizing the building.
But I guess
anyway.
I'm saying, can you use that as one of those reimbursable, to say, hey, we went up?
Yeah, I think I'd have
Cleaning
to,
supplies?
I'd have to kind of look at the historical too, to see if it was a big jump, if we had
Yeah.
a big jump in supplies, but I mean, I've been working with Ginger, and it doesn't seem like we've actually taken some stuff from the park. They had some leftover things, and with what Ashland donated in hand sanitizer and stuff like that, we've been able to stay pretty consistent, but absolutely, if there were any additional or special purchases, we can apply those too.
And the courthouse was shut down majority of that time. I know they've done a really good job getting supplies, but some of which were at no cost. And like I said, we've put this information out. It sounds great, $1,058,000, but when you actually start digging into the details, what it actually cost us and what effects has affected us as a whole, you're going to find it's really just certain departments that were open. The sheriff's office, 911, the road department, some of the other offices had shut down. So,
The special projects things also, I assume they did Tim's office and,
I got all of the maintenance crew's time that I'm going to submit, so all the labor that they've done for Tim's office and installing those shields, I'm going to apply those.
decrease in revenue isn't an expense that you can.
Y'all ready? Okay, under other county buildings, the sheriff's office custodian, that's been moved under the sheriff's department. That's why you see it changed there. But as far as other kind of standout, of course, we're not gonna have to pay our lease anymore for the fire because our building's gonna be completed. The judicial courthouse, we have that set, that whole budget set to mirror what the AOC sent us as a projection of what it will cost to run that building. And of course, they give their percentage back, so that portion is in the receipt side. But we've mirrored what they had sent us.
Hang on. Where'd you get, did you skip to the, you went to the, did you go to the courthouse already, judicial?
Yes, but we can
Okay.
go back if you want.
So, so for all county buildings other than the courthouse, right? That's what this other county buildings maintenance supplies. Is that right? That every county building, we got $10,000 in that line item.
Yeah, and let's remember, when we last met, we had zero cash balance, we had the OTA where it was at. So you're seeing, when she put the cash balances in this, you're seeing some of those lines are still low or even zeroed out. I mean, so we obviously, we wanted the department heads here so that they can see that wherever we pull monies, I mean, if we're talking about putting monies in, and I think another side of the conversation is, we got buildings that, maybe we need to sell, maybe we need to get rid of. We've got a lot of buildings, we got a lot of assets that's costing us monies, but when we have those discussions in years past, it was, oh, no, the county needs to have this. And when you start looking at who actually uses them, in some cases, it's not the county. So, I mean, there's two sides to that discussion, and navigating those waters, what do? Do we just keep increasing monies? Or do we actually look at our assets and determine, hey, maybe we don't need these buildings because it's costing us monies here? I mean, I know Tex Crew is running all over the place. When you start looking at some of these the actual structures themselves, they're owed. They need a lot of maintenance, and we can spend a lot of monies throwing it at these facilities. So I just want to let the court know, don't get caught up on an actual number when the actual facilities, if you haven't been to it, I mean, we've got some old buildings that the county has, and we sit and we ask, why do we have these buildings? And you're starting to see the cost in our budget. Do we, put monies in to make the facility better, or do we just get rid of the building altogether? But I just throw that out there.
Which buildings you referring to?
As far as the building, I mean, we have the old Lions Club building in Draftonville. You've got the community building in Hardin. What other buildings? I mean, we did get the Benton Senior Citizens building. The,
Aurora Community Park.
yes. So, I mean, we've got several. We got rid of the Barnes Grocery Building to the refuse, but so when you look at other buildings, $10,000, I can't remember if we added that. I think we added that 10,000. It was zero. So it's actually better than zero. I think this building was zero, but we put 5,000 into this building. I mean, I'll just throw that out there. We definitely can have conversations about our facilities.
Okay, I'll just keep on going. You guys, again, just stop me when you're ready, anytime, Monty. Okay, GIS is next. I don't recall there being anything incredibly strange there. We spoke with Andy, and he gave us kind of some items that he thought 100% had to be replaced. And then he told us that he could get some useful life out of some other items. So he is here if you guys have questions for him.
Is that, hang on. The janitorial service, I know we're gonna look at the bids tomorrow. That's that's that particular line, right? 72.8?
Yes.
Is that based on, what's that based on?
Judge, do you remember how you came at that figure that you wanted? It's on page 6 of 19, and it's under judicial courthouse. It's 72.8. That's,
So that whole line, if you go, that whole line is balanced with what our percentage is of taking care of the building and the reimbursement from the AOC. So we took, so that's the amount that we took, basically that amount plus the 30,000 for maintenance, building, and grounds. We just split, because we had, what did we have? 120.
120.
Yeah, so we took the 120 and split it between the janitorial service and the maintenance and grounds.
We got bids coming in on that tomorrow, correct?
Yeah,
So
I think by today. Yeah, we'll get them by today, and I have
Change,
not-
hopefully.
have not seen one yet.
Okay, so is
Nobody's
that
bid on it yet?
because?
No.
You're saying, so it's that because the reimbursement is in the 245?
For that,
Okay.
yeah. So if you add all those together, that would be 90% reimbursed by the AOC, and then our 10% for our. No, it's closer to 90%. Yeah,
Oh, that's right, 92.
90 something. Yeah, yeah.
Does that concern you that nobody's bid, or is it going to wait till the last day?
Well, I just got a call from Magic Steam just now, so I'm assuming that he's calling me about that. But last time we bid it, well, 2 times ago we bid it, we got a ton. I think what probably has happened is since we awarded it to somebody and then basically went into another contract with who we have now, that price jumped really high. And I think people are, I don't know that they really know how to bid it at this point. I mean, it's a big undertaking. It's the minimum requirements by the AOC. It's a big.
Well, and this is just my 2 cents on the AOC, the judicial building itself. I mean, Jason, you've worked down there, but, and I know Tech has been down there and seen this, that facility, we're going on what, close to 20 years? It's 18, 19 years. So, I mean, that facility, we had a meeting at the judicial building, I think, last year. And some of the employees had been there from when it first opened up, and to hear them say that, and these are judges, I mean, these are people that worked in that facility, they immediately started having problems when this building opened up. So looking on it from the outside, it looks like a nice structure, but when you get inside, and I know your office is down there, it's not the best facility. I mean, that's just the easiest way to say it. There's a lot of issues with that facility, and to get someone to come in and clean, as Brad said, the AOC standards with a facility that really shouldn't be in that condition, it's a mess.
Well, and you can see that actual expenses through 331 for just the building maintenance and grounds was 127,000. So we've done a lot of work just in that facility, some of which is reimbursed on another approval level with the AOC. But I mean, 30,000 is a really conservative number. I think we've done a lot of the big work this fiscal year, so hopefully we can stay there. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be hard to function that within that budget, but I don't know how else to do it. I mean, we're given that number by the AOC, and that's what we do it with.
So that number is to 281,700. That's the number from the AOC, based on last year's numbers. So you have to think too, as far as that contract, the $10,000 a month contract that we have for that building. There was only a couple of months worth that went into there, or no, that wasn't at all last year. It was just in this fiscal year. So that jump in what we used to pay with what our services were for the past few months, that's not reflected in what they are, their reimbursement calculation.
I guess when the bids do come in, or we award somebody that contract or hire somebody to do that, you'll know a true number what the janitorial services would be. So if it comes in high, we'll have to adjust that.
And that's not, that's just the AOC requirements to be met. That's not including the infrastructure that is owed, needs to be replaced, and those expenses. That kind of ties into what we were discussing earlier about our infrastructure. Obviously, we can't get rid of the judicial building, but it is a money pit, in my opinion. It'd be nice.
And something to just think on this is Brad just said that he's concerned about meeting all the fixes that are going to be needed in this year for this building with the way the budget's set right now. So, you know, in past, I know in the year that I've been here, I've kind of seen, and then I know in the past that I've been told that if big things come up and we have to find a way to fix it and it's not in the budget, we can usually find cushion in other places. The problem is we're not going to have that cushion in this one. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we're deciding how we're moving around money. If the roof falls in on the judicial center and you tell me to find it, the answer is going to be I can't find it. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, this is a budget workshop, so we need to.
If you guys wanted to take a few more minutes recess, because I know that maybe you can look at things by yourself for a few minutes and get your thoughts together. No? Nah? Okay.
We'll go ahead and pick up where we left off.
Okay, GIS is where we left off. We talked about it for a minute earlier before we went back to the judicial center. And Andy's here if you guys have any questions for him.
Yes, the two 5,900 and 4130 there, desktop management and data processing, server maintenance. So is that not that's not a contract? That's not,
processing, desktop management, that is the line item where we budget replacement computers. So anything that's
Okay.
pretty far out of warranty, we try to replace, but we've actually replaced the majority of stuff. So we have a few machines this year that we would have replaced, but, you know, we can work with them the way they are.
What's the server maintenance?
That is for replacing any of our virtual hosts. And we have one of those that I'm going to try to make some modifications on where we can get away with not having to replace it. We had budgeted to replace one of those at about $20,000 this year, but we're going to try to not have to do that.
Okay.
I know we had, I saw Chris come in. We had a question on 911. Receipt side.
Yeah, the question on the receipt side of 911 was what made us sit down together with the department head and come up with 129 for the landline fees. Last year was at 160. Did you want to speak on that? We decided that together, so I didn't know
What
if you.
page is she on?
It's up to you. If you can talk loud enough for people to hear.
Landlines are dropping, and it's an expense people are getting rid of. It's, I think right now we're at 81% of our call volume is cell phones, so if people don't have to have a landline, they won't have one. So it's, some of it is actual decrease and some of it is a projected decrease, because as people tighten up budgets in their own homes because of what COVID's done, lack of revenue, lack of things, the phone bill, internet services, things like that will be one that they'll do away with. So, but the majority of it is the landlines are dropping still, steadily decreasing. Why pay for 2 phones when you can get by with one? It's a problem we've seen since mid-2000, and then it continually gets worse. So that is, that's that one. And then some of the other issues we're seeing, especially on the wireless side, is the number of PSAPs in Kentucky is going up instead of going down. Some other communities have kind of gotten the idea to do what we did here, which is set a fee in place that will actually sustain them. Martin County, Kentucky set a $75 fee on their property taxes per year, which if you look at the population is a much steeper fee than we have here. To kind of get out from under the state police model and do things on their own and make sure they have a PSAP that they can go into the future with. And what that did is cost us 1% of our cell phone revenue. So every new PSAP that's generated, it translates to about a 1% loss in cell phone monies that come in from the 911 Services Board. Last year we added 3, so we had a 3% decrease in that line as well.
So it's a combination of both landline and wireless. Questions on that? We done with GIS?
Yes.
Okay. Next, you'll see school resource officers, or school resource. So this is a new section here. What I wanted to do is put in an actual budget for what it's going to cost that the school's going to fund. The school says they commit $375,000, so that's what we put this together to, basically the school would do a contract with the fiscal court, and they would actually, we would bill them, they would pay for it. There's no hidden cost. The school knows what they're paying for the resource. We know what the cost for the resource is going to be. And if you look at the actual contract, it's 175 days. The school is not in session 12 months out of the year. So this budget is based off of, other than the supervisor, if you look at McCracken County, They have a supervisor that's on a 241-day, so that's what we did with the supervisor. But that's what this is. Personally, I think the school board needs to hire these resource officers. There are several school districts across the state that do that. There's a variety of ways in how school resource officers are funded. If you look at Senate Bill 1, I think the most significant part of Senate Bill 1 that is underutilized or not utilized is if you talk to the folks that testified in Frankfurt, the one thing that they knew that they did not have control of is the funding mechanism. And so they actually put in Senate Bill 1 the ability for donations, contributions. The school district, if they have a fund or a foundation in place, citizens can actually donate to that foundation, but those monies have to be earmarked for school resource officer or safety initiatives. I know we pulled the school's 2019 budget. They received about $84,000 in contributions. I don't know what the monies were used for. I don't know if they do have a foundation that's utilized for raising monies. I know we had a meeting. The one question that was asked was, can something like that be put in place? And I know the superintendent, even the Senator Carroll, who sponsored the bill, didn't answer the question. But that part of Senate Bill 1, if you read it, and I've talked to those who testified in Frankfurt, who say that that was one of the main things that they had to have in that bill because funding is an issue. This is, in my opinion, and not just mine, but even others, elected officials feel that this is a bureaucratic layer. Nothing against any one department, but it just creates more expenses to our budget, and it kind of gets away from the actual school resource officer or safety initiative for our schools. We all know that schools across our region, they hire their employees. Senate Bill 1, if you read it, states that they have to be POP certified. I know the superintendent said he doesn't want to be a chief. He's a superintendent. A chief, other than an elected official like a sheriff, you don't have to be POP certified. But the Senate Bill 1 states specifically that those school resource officers have to be POP certified. So he can't be a chief in theory because he's not POP certified. This, to me, comes down to it's a resource that they're funding it 100%. That's what we put in this budget. What you see right here is what they have committed. Why the school board is not hiring that resource like other school districts, I don't know. But what I put in place is a budget that mirrors what they're funding, and it's a resource that's on 175 days. When that resource is in school, that's where they're at. When they're out of school, that resource is out of school. If you look at, I don't know if we sent that out, but the total cost to us, there's about $114,000 additional cost because any sheriff or chief of police would use that resource outside of the school. And when you do that, that's an extra cost to us, and we're seeing that in our budget. The biggest question is sustainability long term. The school says that money's not the issue; they can fund it, but it bleeds over into our budget. We had representatives from the city present in the meeting. And I think one of the responses was that the city can't use tax monies for the school district. That's incorrect. There are city governments across the state that actually fund school resource officers. And this is not unique. Kenton County has a county police agency, I think, since 1922. They have 4 schools in the county that they put a school resource officer in. The incorporated city limits, the cities provide school resource officers. So there's a whole matrix, if you will, of how governments are dealing with this locally. And when you read Senate Bill 1, when you talk to those who testified, the one common theme that they understood was the funding. This is something that the new Marshal, Wilcox, has even stated himself, that that's the one thing he does not control is funding. And so as we navigate through this, and you know, and I want to share with you when I first became a police officer in '99, I remember watching Heath High School unfold when I was overseas. And I realized that that was back in, not my hometown, but back in my, you know, our neighboring county. When I started at Paducah, I fully expected there to be plans in place for an officer to respond to what was then even called the new norm. It's unfortunate that we even have to think like that, but that's what was being discussed back then. It was actually a push from the officers up to the administration to give us the tools to be successful in an environment like that. And it took years to get that agency to realize that we needed to coordinate with the local schools. If we know that high populated organizations, schools, churches, large business areas are potential locations for these types of events, we need to be prepared. And obviously, you know, we had our incident in 2018. You know, to me, it was frustrating to see what I call it the complacency then. You know, and even after our event across the school, the Senate Bill 1, the initiative was by July 1 of 2021 to have a school resource officer in every school, funding permitted. That's a great goal to have, but it puts a lot of responsibility on the schools to make that happen. And some of our schools across the state don't have the resources. So they put that mechanism in there to where local citizens or organizations can give gifts or contributions to our school districts specifically for school safety. And like I said, you know, what we're doing is something that they just always have done. I mean, it's the sheriff is the most obvious agency to look at to provide this type of service to our schools, but I can tell you that it's changed. It hasn't. It's as leaders in our community, we need to look at what's best for all of our taxing districts and the taxpayer themselves. And in this case, this right here, in my opinion, is not the best because I feel the school districts have the ability to hire these resources. I've said that from day one, and I see it across the state where other school districts are doing that. But the next best thing to do is to put a POPS certified officer in these schools in our county. Is if the school has got their funding. Now, mind you, 2019, they had a $65 million budget. Their expenditures were $57 million. Gents, you see our budget. We don't have $65 million. And $100,000 to us, as we're talking with our department heads, 10 grand in maintenance and stuff, that adds up. In our city governments, that's why I personally asked the mayors to be present. They're not funding school resource officers, and they have schools in their metropolitan communities. So this is, if the school is going to fund it, and Senate Bill 1 gives them the ability to do that, there has been requests for some type of foundation or tax or account to put in place to specifically earmark those dollars for school safety. Senate Bill 1 gives them, it directs the school board, those elected officials, they're elected officials just like us, to actually use a foundation to where any one of us in this community can donate to. Because across the state, they know that funding is an issue. And that's why, I take the emotions out of it and look at this from just personally my experience. When I worked down at Paducah, coming in after the Heath High School shooting, complacency was there. There was no coordination between the agencies. It's not going to happen here. And that mentality, 20 years later, it did happen in our region. And it's unfortunate. It's probably going to continue to happen nationally. But locally, putting a plan in place that is going to sustain time to have a resource at our schools to provide safety, the way we're doing this, I don't think this discussion collectively has been had, other than a meeting that we had with state and city and county leaders and some of the parents to sit down and try to figure out a way to put a resource in the schools that's not going to create funding problems long term. And the best way that we thought was, well, if the school's committing $375,000, we will build a budget for $375,000. Senate Bill 1 states that those individuals have to be POP certified. And it's for 175 days. That's the amount of time that the resource would be in the school, with the exception of the supervisor. So I put that out there as a plan, as a budget, to where it doesn't cost us any additional monies, and the school has already committed those dollars to that resource. And I would even be curious to know if there is a foundation that the school has put in place, because I know one of the parents asked that question, what can we do to where the local citizens and businesses can donate, so that the community can get behind this issue as well. And I think it's important to say too that that $114,000 that I'm talking about, and I think you've got the breakdown. Did you email that to them, or did we just get that?
I can.
No.
I can pull it up.
And then you have to look too, I know we looked at the comp time, the amount of comp time that is to be paid out to the resource officers, and how that plays into additional costs to the fiscal court. And I'll tell you personally, as I've stated before, the school should be hiring the resource officers. That's my professional and personal opinion. The POP certified officer in Senate Bill 1, that helps to where I spoke to a director of school resource officers, and they got a new superintendent who sees the benefits of the school having those employees from where that individual came from. And you hear about it all across the state. I even spoke with a school resource officer representative who was part of that element that testified in Frankfurt. And I get it. If I were in the sheriff's shoes, having we've gone from 19 deputies to 30 deputies, having that resource, to pull that resource to cover out on the road. Speaking with this individual, he says very dangerous because you're trying to do two things. And what this does is focus on one thing, and that is that resource that all they do is school safety. When you try to take a school resource officer and work them at the school and then turn around and work them out on the road, you're expanding the duties of that resource officer. But this is to focus strictly on school resource officers.
That doesn't happen here. They don't work while they're in the school. They don't go and work the road.
No, they work 8 hours in the school, and then they turn around and work overtime on the road.
No.
Yes, I've pulled the numbers.
They go to basketball games and that. The only thing that they would do would be SRT training.
And
I have SWAT certified officers in our schools.
I'll give you an
Part of that.
example. I'll give you an example. I'm not going to use the officer's name, but on a holiday when school wasn't in session, the officer worked the road and worked for the county at double time. And then there was
When school was not in
obviously
session, correct?
Yes, but
Right.
but in the month of December, you have where school was in session and school resource officers were pulling doubles. And the thing is that, and again, you have to understand, and I get it. You're
You'd have
trying
show
to
me,
you're
'cause I
trying to
don't know
do
that happened.
you're trying to use a resource for the road and the school. What this is the focus strictly on school safety. That resource officer in this scenario, this plan is not going to work the road, is not going to work any additional duties other than the school campus.
So, to switch to this, does the school have to agree? Does there have to be an agreement between us and the school?
You have to have a memorandum of, an MOU, a memorandum of
Okay.
understanding. And the superintendent, when I spoke to the folks that testified in Frankfurt and some of what I call the professionals in the school resource officer program that were instrumental behind Senate Bill 1, the superintendent of our schools across the state have an influence on the school board. They're elected officials. And so in the meeting, the superintendent basically said he doesn't want to be a chief. Well, if you look at Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 1 even directs the superintendent to report to the state. His concern was that he didn't want to be a chief. He can't be a chief. It's his designee. So if the school were to hire the employees, then this is not an issue for us. But in this case, he stated that he doesn't care who he works with. He just doesn't want to be the chief of the school resource officers. The school board is the one that signs the contract. So when you he sat there and he said that, but at the end of the day, the school board is the one that would sign the MOU.
Okay, so I guess I asked that question to get to the point of, you feel like, if we approved this, that the school board would sign an MOU agreeing to this?
Well, the school board has to provide school resource officers. I can't speak for the school board. I just know that the superintendent stated that, and he implied that they would work with anybody that provides the school resource officer. He doesn't want to see the school district hire the resource officer because he feels that he would be the chief. And I personally, I disagree with that, because if you read Senate Bill 1, it states who has what duties, and it states the superintendent shall report certain things to the state. And other school districts are hiring the resource officers. So, I mean, really, to answer your question, Monty, it's up to the school board what resource they want to, what agency, I guess, because to them, Senate Bill 1 states they have to be POP certified. That is the main requirement for a school resource officer. As far you cannot go work to be a school resource officer because you're not POP certified. The superintendent is not POP certified. He can't be the chief of police. But that is the one thing that they put in there, was that the resource officer has to be POP certified.
Well, I mean, I obviously wasn't in the meeting, but those that I talked to that were, and it sounds like you're agreeing somewhat with that too. I'm not certainly getting the feel from them that they have an appetite to do this. I don't think they want any change. Now, I understand it's the economic, I mean, I get that. Don't get me wrong. But I guess, my other question is, looking at these salaries, what that would take, what type of POP certified officer do you think you're going to get for that money?
What do you mean, what type of POP certified officer?
I mean, do you feel like that you're going to get, correct me if I'm wrong, I've never been in law enforcement, but the ones that I do know, or some that I do know that are retired, are still my age and still have kids my kids' age. They're not necessarily retiring to truly retire and have a part-time job, which this would essentially be like part-time pay versus full-time. And so are we going to be able to recruit the same type of individuals that we currently have staffed? Would be my...
Currently, I mean, your question, I think what you're asking is there a selection pool out there to recruit from?
He's asking about quality.
Yeah.
Does your quality go down when you go to this plan? Quality of officer.
Okay, what is a quality of officer? Would a quality of officer be somebody that doesn't answer calls for an 8-hour shift? Making double time?
And ours doesn't.
I'm just asking, what is a quality of officer?
The point he's making is we do have quality officers out there. We have SWAT-trained officers. The ones that cost us money, the ones that we hired during the summer, I picked them specifically because they were on our SRT squad. That way, if something does happen, they're out there and they have that training to already be there to respond.
Well, what we're talking about is apparently some folks you've talked to on the school board.
No,
Or
not talk to a single person on the school board.
Okay.
No.
Then maybe I misunderstood who you said you talked to, but what, you have in your mind a quality of officer issue. I'm curious. I want to know.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm making an assumption that,
When officers retire, that
Yes.
you're going to get a certain quality of officer.
yeah.
Okay.
For what we're willing to pay.
For what you're
in
willing
that
to pay.
What quality? That's a very
Because
broad.
Because
that's
a
very broad-
high-quality
Yeah.
officer is going to go
Yeah.
back to another
I don't know how
department
to
and work
answer.
full-time somewhere and get a full year salary.
Pay will normally always affect quality of an employee.
I'm going to disagree with you on that. To some degree, it's the
I've got
individual.
4 businesses
I'm
that
going to
does.
say, I spoke to a director who has a stack of resumes in his desk who he can't, there are retired officers that are trying to get a job like this. The pool is out there. The difference, and there's a variety of difference, but the main difference is that they're working 175 days. They're not turning around and being worked out on the street. Most retired officers are retired. They retire from that work as far as being out on the street. I mean, look what's going on nationally. When you get into a school program where there's 175 days, to a retired officer, and this is speaking with an individual who has been in the school resource officer his entire career, you have to have that individual that wants to be there, first off. That resource, you want someone that really wants to be in our schools because it's our kids. It's safety with our kids. There are retired officers, as you said, that have kids, have families, that would love to be at that school just doing school resource officer. That's all they want to focus on because their kids are in that school potentially, or they understand the value of what they're doing. They're not doing it for pay. Now, obviously, to a certain degree, they would like to have a good wage, but ultimately is to provide that service to protect our kids. And when we say about a quality of officer, okay, that's a whole, we can sit all day and talk about a quality of an officer. But when we're talking about the funding for this long term, this model right here is not working. Funding, but budget-wise, it's not working. And nobody is sitting down and having these discussions except us until now, where it is an issue. I personally know that there are people out there that's all they want to do is this. They would work that schedule to provide that service in our schools. Now, when we start talking about quality of an officer, what I hear is we're going to pick and choose what POP's certified. When you read Senate Bill 1, does POP certified, and I'd love a legal opinion on this, POP certified simply says what? And it implies what?
Well, for years, let me just go back. For years and years and years, the KRS referred to law enforcement officers as quote-unquote peace officers. And so you can go through KRS and find peace officers in statutes all over the place in different chapters. But there's a distinct difference between a peace officer and a certified peace officer. A certified peace officer in KRS it's a legal term of art. It's specifically defined, and that certified and POP certified and certified, I'm saying, is the same thing. So a certified peace officer is very different than just a regular peace officer in that a certified peace officer carries a lot more power, so to speak, a lot more arrest power, a lot more citation power, summons power, So the certified peace officer basically has law enforcement authority to do anything that the criminal statutes would allow a deputy sheriff to do in their county, a state police officer to do in the state, a city police officer to do in their city. That's what certified peace officer means.
And their training is where?
State.
The Department of Criminal Justice,
Department of-
DOCJT.
So like a peace officer, you might find the definition of a peace officer to be a deputy jailer. But obviously, a deputy jailer, a quote-unquote peace officer, it has very different responsibilities and duties and powers than a deputy sheriff. I mean, those are two totally different things and totally different authorities. But the deputy sheriff is a certified peace officer. The deputy jailer is just a peace officer.
And if you read Senate Bill 1, the POP certified officer, the Senate Bill 1 specifically states that they have to be certified. And you get that certification through Department of Criminal Justice. So when we're talking about a standard, what standard is out there that is not in the legal, in the statutes, or DOCJT? Because I'm curious.
But you're talking about a minimum standard as well.
Yeah, but I'm asking.
That's what I'm saying.
What standard?
Our gentlemen that are out there are more than the minimum standard that are out there.
And what's the minimum
And when did
standard?
you talk to those folks that wanted to come work at the school for nothing but school salary?
I spoke to a director.
No,
Who-
were the
who
folks you
has-
said that they're there and they're ready to come, because we can do that.
I didn't speak to anybody that said
That's
they were
what you
ready to
said.
come. No, I spoke
You
to.
said you had people out there that are wanting to work at the school for just that salary.
No, I said retired officers
Right.
that have kids in schools.
Why would you not send those people to me if you had those people there ready to
I
work?
don't have anybody. That's what I'm trying
You told
to
me
tell
you
you.
did.
I'm
You just said
sitting
you
here.
did.
All right. I spoke to a director who is over a school resource officer program, who has applications of retired officers who are POP certified. And he's got a stack of resumes. But what was brought up was a standard of an officer.
I know you're hung up on that. You can't
No,
get
I'm
off
not-
that
I'm not
area.
hung up on
You've been
it.
talking about
I'm-
it for 10 minutes, but what do you hope to accomplish by this?
You said that.
I know you don't want to recognize
folks-
it, but I'm the one that you need
Eddie,
to be talking to.
I'm talking to Monty.
I know.
You said that there was a standard.
No, I did not say that there was a standard. I didn't say there was a standard.
Twisted on words.
I said,
Twist.
do you think that you can get, and you've obviously honed in on what I said, which was a quality officer. And I apologize for if I'm not trying to bemoan any officer at all. All I'm saying is the ones, the few that I've talked to that are retired, we're not looking for what I would consider part-time work.
And I may have misunderstood you. I want to make sure that if there is because we're talking about finding school resource officers to put in our schools. If there is a minimum standard or some type of a standard, well, in trying to find, to answer your question, are there people out there that would do this job? Yes, there are. They have the qualification and they have the initiative to want to do the job. They're out there. Referring to the director who has a stack of resumes, they are out there. He stated that. When you're talking about the part-time, this is 175 days. It's not a full-time position for 12 months out of the year. It's 175 days. So yes, I would argue that there are retired officers out there that would do it because other schools in our region are hiring them. So, I mean, to sit here and say that they're not out there, and it's not categorizing your men compared to a standard that they're above or minimum standard. There are districts in our region that are hiring retired officers who meet the standards. So when you ask me, can we find folks? They're finding them. Why would we not be able to find these resources? They're out there. All this is a budget to where the school is funding X amount of dollars for that resource. The biggest question is it a long-term plan? Because the other side of the coin is you can have retired officers that don't want to work as a school resource officer because they're going to be working the street. So, I mean, there's two sides to that argument, but at the bare minimum, we have school districts in our region and across the state that are hiring retired officers or officers that are POP certified to put in their schools.
What kind of training are they receiving?
They're getting the required training that Senate Bill 1. Do you know what Senate Bill 1 requires for the training?
40 hours?
No.
SRO 1, SRO 2.
It has SRO 1, 2,
But with a
and 3.
175-day
but
contract, they've got to leave the school to go to that training. That's what costs us money with our retired officers, is we pay for them while they're in training for SRO 1, SRO 2.
Well, this gets
You know,
back to where the
how do they
General
leave
Assembly
how do
puts
they
in
leave the
place.
school? You said you want them to be at the school and have 100%, but each one of them's going to have to spend a week in Richmond or somewhere else to.
There is required training.
There's always going to be extra costs other than that 375.
There is required training, and if you hired somebody who was retired, that's been retired, they still have that POP certification. It's, say they're 5 years retired, they have to go through additional training. So I mean, the Senate Bill 1 has it laid out as far as it talks, obviously, SR 1, 2, and 3, but there's also additional training if you get somebody that has been retired longer than 3 years, I believe is what the standard is. But if you get somebody that retires and goes into a position like this, they don't have to take that additional training. They just have to take what Senate Bill 1 states as a training. And obviously, they have that training to be taken throughout the year. Now, COVID has caused a big problem because they haven't been offering those trainings. So the General Assembly, which passed that bill, which became law, is now they're going to have to go back to the table and discuss those issues and make some changes, because if the school districts in our communities that's the law, and training's not available right now. So there are school resource officers who are not getting the training, not at their own fault, but it's not available. So this is going to be something that's going to be discussed in Frankfurt. But this budget, I just put this out there. I'm showing where our budget is nowhere near the school's budget, and it is costing us more monies. It's not a long-term solution. We're just doing what we've always done. And sitting down and talking with you, Eddie, when you talked about how, the school, and you had talked about reducing the overtime. In my professional opinion, when you have an educator that starts picking and choosing where overtime or where that resource needs to be, that's a problem. The benefit of having a POP certified officer who sits at the table and makes
What do you mean,
makes
picks and choose about the overtime that they work is at ball games and security at the school. They're not talking about overtime on the road and not.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense.
It does it makes perfect sense to me, because when you have an educator talking about, well, we don't need a resource over here for whatever reason, the moment you start talking about you don't need a resource, that's where you're going to have problems.
That was at your request that I went there to ask him to reduce the overtime because we were paying half of it.
I didn't request you to go.
You also asked me to go and discuss raising the fee that we collect for their taxes.
I didn't request you to go to the school and tell him to reduce overtime.
You brought up that we pay half of their overtime. You didn't like it.
No.
I said, I'll go back and see about getting them to cover all the overtime And if we have to reduce it, we'll reduce it. That's exactly
That-
what we're talking about.
When we sat down and discussed,
Which time?
the contract that you have,
Mhm.
the school pays half the overtime and you pay
Right.
half the overtime. When you sat down, we asked, why is that?
And I told you.
And you said that their response was that something about the county sheriff's department is they provide
They would provide it anyway.
all over the county.
If they paid no overtime.
I did
they would
not
still-
tell you to
Plus-
go, it was a question that was asked because, once again, we're not on that contract.
You were here when that contract was made. We're going back to the same discussion we had a month ago. You were here when that contract was made. You should have brought up these oppositions to it with that half contract, or half the overtime back then. You understand what I'm saying?
I've always been
You've agreed,
opposed.
you agreed to cost share in 2018.
I've
And now
I've
we're
always
backtracking.
opposed.
We're backtracking.
I've always opposed to the way this is set up, and I will continue to oppose. It's not it's a bureaucratic layer. It's costing more monies to perform a task. I will always be against that.
What money are you going to save by doing this?
It's not about saving monies. It's
No, it
about
has to
putting,
be. You have
it's
to-
about,
You have to say that you're going to do it cheaper.
hold on a second. It's about
Okay.
putting a resource in our schools.
Uh-huh.
Under the current contract, the school is putting X amount of dollars for that resource. We're beating a dead horse here. Obviously, it's costing us more money to put that resource in that school.
You talking about it costs the fiscal court more money, right? Right?
The fiscal court is subsidizing your office.
I understand. You say
So
it every meeting.
yes, we see it on our end.
But do you understand that the school district is the biggest part of our tax base? You understand we're at 3.6%. They paid us $370,000 over the $375,000 that they paid for the school. All it takes is a vote for them to lower that fee, and you've lost all the money that you saved by sending this to county police or SLEO or here or there.
Let me
If they
me
drop
put it
that
to you
fee
this way.
to 1.5%, you might save 114, but you're going to lose 216
Yeah.
trying to save 114.
And that gets away from school safety.
No.
Yes, it does.
The only reason why
If
you're
you
doing this is
look
because
at-
of budget.
No. If you
You
look
said it was a
at,
budget issue.
if you look at what is being committed, this has to be a long-term.
And it's always worked. The only dissonance
this-
here is because you got
Hold up
mad
a
at me
second.
over the grant.
Negative.
That's the only dissonance that we're even here. We
Negative.
were going, we were making progress. We went from 1 to 5, 5 to 8. You never said a word. I asked you to go from 8 to 11. I said, here's a grant for 3 years that will help until we can get everything going. The school was on board with it. I was on board with it. And then we would have met. We would have had one officer in each school, just like Senate Bill 1.
Senate Bill 1.
And I don't think there's a citizen hardly in Marshall County that would have disagreed with spending that money.
Senate Bill 1 states if funding is available.
It's available.
And in that, the school is putting X amount of dollars for school resource officers. I'm simply saying what we are doing is not the best. It can be better. Now, as I stated before, the school board, which is made up of elected officials, in my personal and professional opinion, they need to hire these resource officers. That's the first thing that you have to think about. I've had that opinion from day one. I've seen complacency when I worked down in Paducah after Heath High School. And that is my honest opinion on
What does
the
that,
resource.
how does that apply
Hold
to
up,
us?
hold up.
How does that
That,
relate
that
to
is
us that
my
you've seen
honest
complacency in Paducah?
opinion that the school should be funding or hiring these individual resource officers, but that they're not doing that. We're doing what we've always done. The school is contracting with the school or the sheriff's department. I'm showing you where it's costing us more monies. This is a bureaucratic layer, as one of the mayors in our community stated. The school needs to take on this responsibility. It's not happening. We're having this discussion. This budget here, I'm simply putting it out there. It is showing the statutory required resource, the monies that the school is putting into it. One thing that we don't know, which I think is the most critical part of Senate Bill 1, is if the school, the board, is taking advantage of the actual foundation. That's what they put into that bill, because they knew that these discussions were going to be had. Funding is what they cannot. In Wilcox is quoted. I mean, you can, he says he has no control. The state has no control over what we're discussing. These funding mechanisms are coming out of our budgets. This can be done in a way, I don't like it, but I'm not going to sit here and not say anything when we're talking about putting monies in these departments, when we're putting $114,000 into it, and then when you look at what actually we're getting in return when they're working the road, absolutely not. I'm not going to, has nothing to do with anything else. I make decisions, and in this
I
case,
just
I'm
told
looking,
you why.
I'm
it's
looking
not-
at this.
I just told you. And you're
At the-
making my own point for me.
At the end of the day,
If they go to Saleo and they drop our fee to 1.5, you're not going to save 114,000. You're going to lose 216. So then we have to worry about covering what we actually do have. Because
This-
then my fees go down to almost 1.12, like she said.
if they drop your fees, there are other funding mechanisms that the school has. I just sat here and said, 2019, they had a $65 million budget.
I'm not worried about the school.
They expended
budget there.
$57
You
million.
cut our fees, I'm worried about our patrol officers.
We're already subsidizing your office. If they cut your fees, are you saying that they're going to cut your fees?
Mm-hmm. I'm not saying they will, I'm saying they have the authority to.
Well, of course.
But
That's an
I
agreement
have the authority
between.
not to collect their fees, but then that's
Absolutely.
370,000 less.
I mean, that's between you and the school. To sit here and say that, you
You
know.
control our budget.
To sit
do.
here and say that they're going to reduce those fees.
I'm not saying they're going to. I'm saying the county police thing, we're wasting our time there. It's not going to work. The only other option is going to be Saleo. Well, why should he pay that fee for the service for us to run the department? All of those things. He's paying for our portion of it too, the $370,000. You drop that fee to 1.5, you're losing $216,000.
Yeah, it was, we were asked to look at comp and overtime accrued for at least the 5 school resource officers that are on Time Clock Plus. And so there were, one officer accrued 33 hours of comp time. Another officer was 58.5 of overtime that we actually paid him. One was 89.25 of comp hours earned. 117.75 of comp hours earned, and then 87 hours of comp time earned. That is just for the months of January, February, March, April, May. So I think part of our question was, I mean, in March, April, well, they stopped school in March and April and May, but we're still accumulating, well, every single one of them, except for one, there's one with 24 hours in March. One was 17.625 hours in March. So we're kind of trying to wrap our mind around how.
Just depends on which units they are. I mean.
They're all school resource officers, though.
You still got SRT training. That's going to be extra. They'll either earn overtime or comp time. The school never stopped for the SROs. I mean, they're.
Right, but I mean,
till
if they're.
last Friday.
Right, but there was no special events going on.
I just told you, it doesn't have to be school events.
So,
I've got officers that are on SRT. Rally, Nick, Steve-O was on SRT. Those guys are going to be collecting overtime for that because it's above and beyond.
okay, well, one of them you just mentioned, actually, 2 of them you just mentioned didn't have any during April or May.
Yeah.
And then one of them that you didn't mention had 17 and 2.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where we're asking, like, well, if they weren't even in school and there was no special events and they were just working, I know they were going to school, they were delivering meals, those sorts of things, what would have been the key element for them to have comp time earned? Because from the budget standpoint, that's what we're looking at. If today, all 5 of these, again, we only see 5 of them that are in time clock, so that's all we could pull.
Right.
Of these, that's a budgetary expense for us. So that's kind of our question, like how are we earning comp and comp time even when school wasn't even in? And I know you said SRT training, and I
Because
understand
those are the
that.
5 officers that are full-time, that are not retired. So they do things for us.
Right, so back to Judge's point, that's a cost to us.
But it's also a service.
Well, we're not saying that we don't want the service.
You
I
know what I'm
mean,
saying? That was the, I think, I wasn't here when the shooting happened, and that was the main selling point when we went to 1 to 5, was that you would get those officers in the summer and while they weren't at school, because, I mean, you've got fall break, Christmas break, they help us cover.
and I think that's what we're getting to. It's,
Yes,
don't want
and
that,
when
then
you
we've gotta
start,
cover
when
it
you start
somewhere
looking at the call volume in this community call volume wise doesn't, I mean, a 30-man agency, we've gone from 19 to 30 in your agency. And there being, in the summertime, you've got a 30-man agency. The call volume doesn't justify a 30-man agency. And, you know, if you look at these numbers, this goes
that
back to
including SRO?
2018.
Is 30
If you go back to
all of them, right?
2018. The subsidy. What I'm getting at is what was originally discussed, and where we've gotten to now. We've got to stop and say, okay, wait a minute, this isn't working.
You didn't think it would ever grow from 5?
Long term, this is not
2 years
working.
ago?
How can we make this work? The attempt to get the elected officials in our community to sit down and discuss. You know, we've got 2 cities. We got schools in our metropolitan area. The Kenton example, you know, they participate. To say that what we've always done is the model moving forward, I'm disagreeing with that. I'm saying that we can still accomplish the same thing. I put this into a budget so that you can see it. I'm showing you the amount of monies. How much do you even know what our total cost for the county, the fiscal court, comp time is? Any one of you know what that is?
You asking me?
Yes, I'm
No.
asking.
No, I don't.
It's
No,
well
no,
over,
no.
it's just under $500,000. Every now and then, we have to look into what's working and what's not working, I wouldn't say what's working and what's not working, but
budgetary impact of.
yes. And mind you, our budget, we've gone from 16, this year we're looking at a balanced budget of 24. There's people out there that think that we have a ton of monies. And obviously, as we're sitting here and we're discussing, we don't. So this whole process is not the best process, and that's just my personal and professional opinion. It can be better. Do you think that, I mean, really?
I mean, with all due respect, you've mentioned Kenton County. I mean, I'm just making sure Kenton County is Covington. It's a large county with a large city, at least one large city within it, probably has more than that. I mean, it's essentially Metro Cincinnati South.
We have 22 cities.
Yeah. So I understand wanting to have cities involved. I do think Kenton County, compared to us, may not be a fair,
No,
apples to apples.
When you look at it in what actually, you look at Boone County, which is their neighboring county, most of their residents are in the county. They have 3 cities. So, I mean, it's across the state, it's different. That's why, the General Assembly with Senate Bill 1 could not, here it is, here's a blanket approach, and this is what we have to do. They knew going into this that we can say, thanks to the General Assembly, they knew going into this that funding was going to be an issue. Those who testified knew that funding was going to be an issue. And that's why they put that mechanism in the Senate Bill 1, because funding is an issue. It's not to associate, questioning the funding mechanism to one's, compass as far as what they feel about school safety. It's the fact that even the General Assembly knew that funding was going to be an issue. We can go as far west and as far east and see some of our communities, funding is a legitimate issue. But when we sat down and looked at this, trying to do two things, and that's what we're doing. We're using an agency that inherently is going to try to do both, provide school safety and put officers out on the road. If I were in his shoes as an elected official, I'd be trying to do the same thing. But at the end of the day, we have to stay, okay, wait a minute, let's look at this in more detail. There are costs to us in our budget that already we're looking at. That's why we're sitting here today with department heads. We've got issues in our budget. And I even brought up that, his office requested $967,000 more dollars. We have to step back. The same day that was delivered, that was a concern that I had with the budget. Do you think that I want to sit here and put a budget in place as a county police force? No, I would rather see the school do it and us try to support them with the foundation, which I think is the key element in Senate Bill 1, is that those entities in our community can fund to that school safety. And I don't know. All I can do is go back and look at 2019 and see that they brought in $84,000 in contributions. Don't know where those monies went to. But I do know that when asked if we can, nobody had an answer. And Senate Bill 1 specifically states that, yes, we can. And it lays it out there for them. That is a change in Senate Bill 1. Is that being utilized? I don't know. I have no idea. Should it be utilized? Absolutely. Speaking to the people that testified, that was the key thing that they had to put into Senate Bill 1. And are we utilizing it? I can tell you that the director that I spoke to in our region, he was unaware that if his school district is providing that. And I don't know if other school districts are taking advantage of that. I don't know. But that's an option to where if there are monies out there that our communities can support for school safety, is that taken advantage of? That may solve these issues. I don't know. But I do know that Senate Bill 1 gives them the authority to put that in place. We don't have any monies budgeted. I just sat there and told you that right now with the comp time totals, it's more like 400, I don't know what it is. It's like $450,000. None of that is budgeted in this budget. We've got some areas that we have to look at in this budget. I'm putting this on the table.
Yeah,
the court obviously can make a decision, but we have got to get this under control.
All right. So so you've got it out there.
It's out there.
I'm not. It's out there.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
At this point, anybody that wants to call us and give us their opinion on it needs to before. This is not something we're going to vote on today, nor are we going to hash this out right now, because I'm not comfortable with
tomorrow, we'll be doing the first reading of the budget.
Yeah.
We typically do the second reading towards the end of the month. You know, there are a lot of questions. I do know that, you know, in that meeting, one of our mayors even said the same thing. The school takes this on. This is I don't think it was looked at in detail. And we have to look at this in detail, and how it's affecting our budgets. And
Why
is
would
it
you
a
not have looked at
long-term?
it in detail because you were here when that was set up?
In a long-term plan.
I mean, you were the only one here when we went from 1 to 5. Why would you have not looked at that in detail?
I'm gonna,
Just ignore
Yeah,
it.
it's on
I'm
the-
just gonna ignore.
It's on the table.
It's
on the table.
it's
Constables.
It's do what?
I said constables. That's the next one, right? Can we?
I'm
I mean,
gonna-
do we need to resolve this question today?
Gentlemen, this is the budget. I put
It's your
this in the
budget,
budget
yeah.
so you can see it, so we can
Yeah.
have these discussions.
We-
And you can
we
see
have.
how it's affecting our budget.
Yeah.
And as we move forward, I mean, we have department heads that are asking where can they find monies to provide the service to the citizens. We take taxes in from the citizens. We provide that service to the citizens. And right now, as this budget sits, I mean, that's why we're sitting here having these discussions. And, you know, this is, I put this on the table. It is literally an option. I'm showing you the pros and cons of what we're currently doing and what is being proposed. You know my opinion. I don't know anybody else's opinion if the school should be taking this on, but they're elected officials just like us. They can't hide behind the superintendent. That school board has to make decisions. I don't know. But I can tell you that when it comes to school safety, what we're doing here, having 2 feet, the road and the school, is, in my professional opinion, in some cases it's dangerous, others, and that's from somebody else who's in the profession, put that source, that resource, specifically doing school safety. If it's going to fall into the sheriff's office as a contract, we're subsidizing his office, it's ultimately affecting our budget. So that's why I put this in here.
I do have an opinion on this, and my opinion is I will not vote to take this from the sheriff's office and create a county police and vote for a budget that includes a salary for the county police, so I got that out there.
Anything else y'all want to discuss on this? All right, let's move on.
Okay. Monty, you were right. Constables is next. That hasn't changed.
Once today. I'm right.
After that's the OEM budget. I can't think of anything big in there that's
I can.
a huge difference.
What's the, I thought the whole purpose of the, so I guess talk to me about what's included in the 86.3.
That is both. So if you look at your salary schedule, the one that looks like this, there's still an open spot for OEM director. It just says open right now.
What,
Let me
have a
find
page?
it.
If you go
It's
back,
the one that says GIS, OEM, animal sanitation nuisance at the top. It's probably the 6th page in your
you looking for
Isn't
OEM?
it? Is it on a back page or something maybe?
No, it's on the front page, and at the top, kind of where there's, where they're all labeled of what departments are on there, it says GIS, OEM, animal sanitation, and nuisance. GIS is the very first thing on the page, and Casey Counts is the first name on the page.
4 pages from the end.
4 pages from the end. Okay.
Okay, so it's the
Okay.
second little section there. So open, it says OEM, so the director position's open, and then Darlene, and then Kurt is on there as well.
Okay. Now, I thought we were going to a part-time.
My intentions were to make that a part-time position, but when we last met with the OTA reductions and then the cash balances, the balances out for her, we left everything as is so that she could get the balances, the cash balances, to where we can balance a budget. Now, that was my intentions, but this did not change because of that.
How much do we get reimbursed on those, Erica? Do you know right off?
Off the top of my head, I do not know, but I can get those numbers for you, and I can get actuals that we have so far this year.
Thank you.
Is that a question as far as part-time or full-time?
Well, I mean, you answered. Enough. Okay.
The next section is the ambulance service. Not very much difference from last year, other than the grant purchase equipment. They are doing a grant to, I can't remember the name of that equipment.
Lucas device?
Lucas device, there we go.
Do we have so was that in on the revenue side or no?
It is not on the revenue side, so as it is in here, if they don't get the grant, it's still in here for us
To do it,
to
no matter
spend,
what?
yes.
Oh,
If
okay.
we end up with the grant, we could amend it in, and then
Okay,
for the receipt side and the out to wherever you all choose to do.
okay.
So that's how it is in there as of right now.
All right.
Fire protection, no change really there. The next is the animal shelter. You'll see that what's budgeted is the salaries, the non-salary items. We moved to let the animal shelter use their donation account this coming year to supplement all those spaces, since they have a $30,000 donation account that they can use for this year. Since we're looking for places to cut, we thought we could let them use their donation account and then revisit this again next budget year.
Okay, so they've agreed to that. I mean, I'm not saying that she has the choice, but
I'm waiting to order, we discussed it.
Okay.
so
Yeah.
the point is that we're using that money to supplement. It is not that we are not going to have an animal control, right?
Right.
Because if you just looked at this, you would think you can't have an animal control and just have personnel.
Right.
Because you actually have to feed them.
Right,
and
right.
spay and neuter them. So that is coming out of their donation.
Monies that we already have.
Yeah, and that way, it would be clearer too that we're not using the donation account for personnel either. So, so when you do donate, you know it's going to the animals and not personnel.
Okay, there has traditionally been two sections of the sanitation salaries, but you all voted to treat them all the same, so now that section says zero, they're all down under the county paid section. So that's really the only change, only big change there. Miscellaneous health services, we haven't budgeted anything in there in a while. The cemetery board, we have not used our cemetery maintenance, so we took it out as far as the budget, and if something came up, we figured we would address it at that point. The rest of it is the same. The next section is the county services section. So the only difference there is the special service grants that were discussed at the end of June last year. The nuisance board, no large changes there either. The Parks Department, I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there are is there something that really stands out to me? Can you
Well,
think of something?
one, you have a reduction in park labor, right?
Right, so, as you go through your salary schedule, that has everybody's names and their departments and what they, are set to make, one of the items that was removed was part-time labor, some of the part-time labor. So that included the part-time and park overtime.
Well, it's more than that, isn't it?
Part-time was
current?
around $20,000 and park overtime was around 8-ish. That's what I wrote notes to myself for.
Well,
And it does say 65.
Again, not on this one, because I was looking at the old one to try to figure that. I thought it was straight up, the difference was, Jessica Treese.
Did we ever get clarification on what she is doing? Because the last I heard, she would still have a job at the park if she wanted it, or she could choose to go to 911, but she's not listed here. So I think Chris and I both need clarification on where she's going and what she's doing.
So on this budget, she's on 911's sheet, not on parks.
So she doesn't have the option of coming back to the park then?
Well, it's 911, but then, so yeah.
My last directive, as we talked, was she goes back to the park. But I know, Chris, you had mentioned that there were still discussions. I know in the budget, that might have been something where we overlooked that she was still in 911. But my last, the intent, as we discussed in court, was 911 had an opening, and to move her from the parks to fill that opening because of the COVID. She was being brought in to get trained up so that if his staffing went down, he would at least have somebody there who was trained up. But it was about a $6,000 reduction in her pay, and
We discussed that in
that's
court?
that's something that was advised to me that was a significant reduction. I made a blanket decision to say put her back in the park with that type of reduction. Now, obviously, the budget doesn't show that, and 911 still has a position that hasn't been filled. But I think to answer your question, my directive was to move her back to, or keep her in the parks.
She should be shown here.
She should be in the
Okay,
parks.
so that would reduce the amount that I am showing. I'm showing that, let me find this here, a $65,500 reduction in county park labor. So that would significantly impact that. So you're saying really all I've lost is the 2 part-time positions, but that other full-time position is being kept in the budget?
Yes.
Okay, so that 65.5 can be adjusted to add back in another full-time salary, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's gonna change, obviously.
Yes.
So, but
Yeah, that will change all of this. So
Is her
just keep that in
salary
mind. It'll
staying the
have to be updated.
it's not in here.
It's not in there.
It's under 911.
Okay.
Okay, that right there, okay. Is that how much she was making at the?
Okay, so it's on the last, I think she's on the last, not this salary one, but if you go back and look at the last one that she sent, probably 1st of May, she was on there. And if you take that subtracted, it was
Makes
definitely.
more than that, okay.
She was making more at the park than she would be at 911. We'll make those changes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we have our judicial center bonds and our other expenses. Oh, do you want to talk about? Okay.
Yep. I'm just making sure from the last one to this one, where my notes are. Okay, so, the supplies, that's obviously a significant decrease. Is that, I guess, is it possible at the park to, what's made up of that supplies, I guess?
So what is in there now, what is being allotted to us now in the county park supplies, $4,300. And that's $42,667 less than we have had. That amount will not leave us anything to line soccer fields, to strap baseball fields, to bring in ball field dirt. Basically, those essentials will all be gone. Anything that is broken, any swings that break on the playgrounds will essentially just have to come down because there won't be money there to replace anything like that. That $4,300 that is left in there, I believe that only covers our software that we have now and some other contractual things. So that's not getting anything, fixing anything, or doing anything. That is just contractual obligations that we currently have that are fulfilled there with that $4,300 that's proposed to be budgeted.
And if you look, again, if you look at this budget from the last time we met, most of these items were zeroed out. So every department, for the most part, has needs. And I'm sure you guys know this, as we move forward, to put monies in these departments, we have to identify where they're coming from. I mean, that's, I know, we haven't even heard from the road department yet, so.
Yes.
It's,
haven't.
That also, too, one other note with that, and one of my biggest concerns is the fact that the mower repair, I know we spent all $2,500 that was budgeted this year really quickly, and that's totally gone. So that's also not taking into account, repairs that need to be made to all of our mowers, which would significantly cripple us if we start to go down in mowers. So that's something else that we need to consider. And like I said, I understand in the grand scheme of things, I just want you all to be aware of what is actually in here and what can be expected of my crew with what we're allotted. And we will do everything that we can with that. But I just want to make sure that everybody has some very realistic expectations of what can be expected from the Parks Department with this proposed budget, because it will be drastically different than what we've been producing for the past year or so since I've been in there. Significantly reduced.
Is that the same line item that the leases come from, or for the mowers?
I believe that is separate. I believe the mower lease is coming out of the equipment, County Parks equipment.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that we have put that in that line. So the
That
mower
covers that.
repair is just strictly mower repair.
How much longer is on the lease of those, Brittany, do you know?
We are getting pretty close. We don't have all of them leased. I believe we only have one mower that is leased. The others we own, and we're getting pretty close to the end of that lease. I can send a message over and have you an answer in the next few minutes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, so under other expenses, we have our judicial center bonds, we have our arts commission debt service, and of course, that's reimbursed, dollar for dollar. So it's a wash. We have our KIA debt service, under this line as well. We have budgeted for our auditors, our county insurance, which has increased, and we'll probably see that increase for a few years to come until our loss falls off. Let's see, there's our general fund investments. Remember when we talked about receipts, I told you that, I separated them out so you could see them. So this is the exact same number as the beginning balance for our, investments, which is the bond money. And then we move on to the last little section of just other things. As far as things that stand out, our workers' comp premiums, they did go down a little bit this year, which is good. You'll notice the wellness program expenses is at 45. It has been budgeted in the past at 60. So that's one of the things that's on my list to make sure to draw attention to. We've had conversations about how we should continue with that, and as it's set right now, that 45 covers what we anticipate will be the payouts for this coming fall, what we always pay out in October for the things that people did for that following calendar year from October to October, and then nothing after that. So to not do the wellness program after October is how it's on here now, not the way that we have always done it. And I don't know if you guys wanted to have any discussion on that, or.
15,000 is the administrative fee that we pay to Peel and Holland for administering our wellness program. So that's the reduction in there.
Does not doing the wellness affect the premium at all?
No, it doesn't have any bearing on our premium. I mean, what it does do
Directly.
Directly, right. Yeah.
It could have
the intent of a wellness
negative
program, right, is to
impact.
keep your claims down, obviously.
Yes.
And then you have a healthier population. Ours isn't as impactful as you'll see a smaller business with maybe they have self-insurance, or, all of our risk is spread out through Kentucky Employee Health Plan. So it's thousands of individual lives where wellness programs become very impactful is a self-insured small business, and you have 50 people, and you really start to affect the change of health in your employee population, and then yes, your cost it gets driven down. So it's a little bit different for ours, but.
And as far as the participation, we're less than 50%, I believe, on our employees that participate. So when you look at the cost is going to less than 50% that participate. And you can, the other side of that coin is those that don't participate, they potentially have the same rate effect if the lifestyle is not a healthy lifestyle. That'll be something that we can discuss, because I think CAECO, some counties have their wellness administered through CAECO, and it's still Peel and Holland, but through CAECO, it's done free. So that's something that we'll discuss moving forward. on how we want to, if we even want to look at that, but there might be some potential there to find a program through CAECO to where we can get that administered for free.
Okay, the next fund is the road fund. Brad's asking if anybody needs a break. I think that means Brad needs a break.
No, I don't need a break.
Yeah, I could use a break.
Okay, you need a break, Monty?
I could use one.
All right, I think we got everybody. Let's go ahead and start with the road department. Y'all have any questions?
I do, I need lots of
Because
those.
I know.
Yeah, I have some concerns.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Let's hear it.
Just going down line for line, down to travel, I know y'all have got 3,000 in there, but, I'd like to move that into our safety, because we have no money for safety items.
I think I remember putting the travel back in because of the travel that you have to have for some kind of training. I can't recall.
The training will be, the ones that we've got to do, research and stuff, that will be at the dam or at the road department.
Okay.
So we won't have to have that travel money in there. So if we can move that down to the safety line item.
Did you say safety, Wendy?
Yes, our safety supplies. Yeah. It is. Yep.
Is that it?
No. No, that's just the beginning.
Wait a minute, 4810, I got uniforms, road labor, and support.
Going down, it's a. it's another-
4810,
Yeah. 4810 on
right?
It's
Is that what I'm talking about?
9100, 4810.
9100?
Yeah, you gotta flip to the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's right in the middle of safety equipment.
It's a separate.
That's like for our vest and,
It's a separate only
No.
item.
y'all ready?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, going on down, we've got several things that are zeroed out. One thing being the building repair and expenses. We've recently had the maintenance crew come out and look at our roof that was leaking. We got a estimate also to get it fixed in case it didn't work and it's still leaking. And that was $6,000. And then now we've got another leak in the sign room where water's coming in. So I don't really know how much that's gonna cost.
In the main building?
In the sign room,
Is that metal or shingle? Metal?
metal.
The new construction sign room? Is that where the office
No,
space?
it's nothing that we've done. It's like where the outside entrance is, it's leaking there. It's coming in the building. But I don't know as far as what that's gonna cost to get that repaired either. But I do know the other place is 6,000. So I feel like there needs to be some money in that line item. Then the next thing is the road materials. We've got $40,000 in there. We spent last year like 130 plus. That was as of March, but that's like our patching oil, all of our rock. We're not going to be able to. I just want everyone to understand what we're not going to be able to do with what we've got here. Cause there's lots of things that we do that's gonna require us to have material, and we're not gonna be able to have that. Even at $40,000, I mean, that will be just kinda like emergency type situations that we have to have riprap or rock or something. And then, like Justin, I know we've went out and looked at, a couple of roads. One, Dogtown, the big place that's in it. We don't even know what we're getting into there. Like, if we dig down, we don't know if there's a spring under the road or what, but we don't know how much we're talking to fix that one location. Then you've got out there where we went with Ronald Smith, you're talking probably at least $50,000 to fix that issue, and it's going to be an issue, like, probably soon. And that's just 2 roads. I mean, it's just concerning to me knowing that there's nowhere else to pull from. Like, if we have something go on, like Erica was saying, there's no cushion there anymore. So I see that being an issue down the road if we leave that at 40,000.
And what, you've got the 2 issues, but what, I know we spent 132. What is a comfortable number?
Comfortable number? I mean, I'd say we need at least that back in there. Because we've been really conservative this year, I feel like, on our rock and materials.
132, please, back in there.
Do you have much surplus, Wendy, on rock material from?
No, we don't. The next one that I'm concerned with is the culverts. We spent 125 plus so far this year on culverts, and of course, it's zeroed out too. So we're gonna do fundraisers or I don't know. Then moving on down, sign materials. By law, we've got to have our signs up, stop signs, road signs, weight limit signs. It's zeroed out too. We need at least 20,000 back in there.
Is that related to that federal mandate?
Yeah.
The reflective signs and.
Where's the sign
all the
number at?
Striping and.
Is there a deadline on that?
We're beyond it.
Yeah, we are.
You're talking about like the road main,
To com-
that has to be retroreflective. So all the road mains in the county do. It's just stop signs that intersect state highways right now.
Do we have all those done, or?
Not the ones that intersect state highways. County roads that intersect county roads.
especially with the kids out of school right now, they're, bored, I guess. Then my next big concern is the parts and repairs. We've spent over 125,000 on parts and repairs this year to maintain our equipment, and we've got 25,000 in there for the year. And the first month of the budget last year, we spent $25,000, so
Just in the first month.
just in parts and repairs.
you think you need, Wendy?
I mean, I think what we've spent so far is pretty comparable to what we, I mean,
124?
that was as of March 31st, so,
You guys have spent more out of there since then.
right. So even if we done 125, that's, hopefully we won't have to have any more money. I don't know.
The pipes, culverts, and sewers, what amount? Yeah, 120.
125. That was as of March, so, I mean, if we're, depending on paving, if we're gonna be paving or not, we'll decide on if we can cut that price anymore on the culverts replacement. I mean, we can put enough money in there for emergency situations where when we have a bad culvert come up in the road, you know, that we just plan on replacing those. Or if we're gonna have any money in the paving, then, of course, our list for next year, we've got most of those culverts replaced. And on the paving, we've got it at 220. So that's not even half of the paving list that we've got for this next year. We would have to move those roads to the next year.
How many roads can you get in District 1 with 220,000?
None.
None?
There you go. You heard it. People look at District 1.
Just saying. I know we don't have any money in the equipment rental, and if we have to fix the one location on Lee Bird Road that we looked at, Justin, we'll have to rent some equipment for that. We'll have to have a long reach track hoe and stuff for that.
That's what the equipment line is, equipment rental? Or
Yeah,
does that include rental and
No, it's under
any
rental.
new? Oh, it's under,
Equipment rental. Let's see. It's 3640. It's about
oh,
halfway on
I
the first
got
page.
you, I got you. We were already past that, okay, so.
Yeah.
That was 10,000.
Anything else?
The 80,000 that we've got under bridge, since we're not gonna have enough money in there for an actual bridge or something to apply for the 80/20 money, I mean, we could move that under the culverts.
The culverts?
If you move that, I have to take 80 out of our receipts because I have the 80/20 money budgeted in. So it's an in and out, it washes itself. So if you're taking that off, I have to take it off the receipt side too.
Well, I think the 80/20 monies can be used for culverts and bridges.
It can be, but it will be hard to use it for culverts, mainly because the way you have to be reimbursed and stuff. We can't start the work until, of course, the agreement goes through, and that's 2 or 3 months, time everybody signs it. I think it's just gonna be really difficult to do culverts that way, to get reimbursed, unless it's a box culvert or something. I mean, something we'd have to identify way ahead of time, like we do the bridges. Because if we have a cross culvert that comes up bad and we need to replace it, we usually need to replace it really soon. So waiting for all of the paperwork and stuff will not be good.
Yeah. I think we waited 7 months on the last one.
What about
But those monies, man, it'd be hard not to leave those monies on the table. How difficult, when you say difficult? Could we predetermine roads that we know we're gonna be replacing culverts? I know we have our emergency, pop-up culverts, but I'd hate to see $80,000 out of the 80/20 fund monies not be used.
Right.
And I know 80,000
It
does
depends. I
not do a
mean,
bridge.
we're not gonna be able to pave, so, I mean, you know what I'm saying, like, we could do like, we've got Dusty Trail down, I've sent in for discretionary funds for that. Most likely, we're not getting that this year. So I was talking to Roy and Nicole about, we could move that to use for our flex funds next year, when it comes back around. Those culverts have to be replaced, and there's a lot of them. But going out, I mean, we have to send, it'd be a lot of documentation, because, which, I mean, they can do it, I have faith. But it's gonna be a bigger challenge, especially with them just learning how to do the funding and stuff, with me not being there.
The Dusty Trail, the discretionary funds, you don't think we'll get?
I don't see it happening. I've talked to the state a couple of times about it, and they don't think that we'll get it.
They say why?
They don't think the funds will be there.
Where do they think those funds are going?
I don't know. That's 220,000 right there that we applied for, but, I mean, if we're lucky, maybe we'll get it, but we still have to have 220,000 up front that we haven't budgeted in.
Yeah.
salt?
Salt, we don't need any salt. We're good
So
on salt.
We know we don't have bridges. And we've got 80,000 identified. So technically, we could zero out the bridge. What about repair bridges? I know we talk about new bridges, but do we have any bridges that need repair that we know of?
Not that we're aware of right now.
So we could zero out the 80, right?
And zero out the receipt of it too? From this conversation, I'm gathering that we're not going to turn it in for the other thing it can be used for, which was culverts, is that what you said?
Yeah.
I don't know all the road lingo.
Yeah, it's culverts.
So we'll need to zero out the receipt side too. Okay. So if you do both those things, it's still balanced without any other changes.
Yeah.
Why aren't we taking the 705 out of her funds and not just using the bond money? Why can we not just use the bond money for that project?
For what project?
Southwest one.
Whatever the Southwest One DRA project,
Well,
and free that up.
The contract bid was 2.4 million for the water and wastewater line extension and the interceptor project for those bonds. The bonds, to my understanding, gives some wiggle room as far as what those monies can be used for. But I don't know if we could justify using those monies for road paving from water and wastewater. I don't know how that would be perceived? It's a good question, but
I think
understanding that
it's something we need to at least,
we wrote a description of each project to get the bonds.
Talking about that, the one we did last year.
yes.
And we've got
I think
2.4.
wouldn't that fit into our description? I don't have it in front of me, but
It's certainly something we need to look at.
not specific though, I mean, it's more general than specific,
Yeah.
right?
Some of them were
They weren't,
Jonathan
some
Creek
of 'em-
water, weren't they?
I thought we added something in there, kind of for this purpose, at one of our meetings.
Well, the way I understood it was if it's, say, another water and wastewater project within Southwest One, then it's wastewater and water project. But to do a road project, I don't know if, that I don't know. I don't know if we can deviate and
I've got it here in a minute.
she's pulling up the minutes now.
Is that you looking at the bond now?
I think what we did was we put in the turn lane because we didn't have DRA's approval. And then we got DRA's approval. So we put that in, that language
in case.
in case we didn't get DRA. Because at the time, we didn't, because of all the timelines, we got denied, I think, through TVA. But then we got DRA and discretionary funds. So you think that those, you think the bonds, what DLG, because we did submit, because we didn't know if we were going to get approved for DRA or discretionary funds.
Yeah, what I remembered was adding some language about roads, but it was within that section dealing with park infrastructure, not just general roads.
The turn lane.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, what we have in the, where is it at there? If you look at the paving for Southwest One, the DRA project, 705, that includes, 705 includes the DRA. If bond monies can be used for the turn lane and the boulevard, then you can pull those dollars out of that to put into paving?
That's not limited to just the turning lane, is it, Brad?
It just says, but not limited, yeah.
That would be anything in the,
Yeah. So if you pull from the 705 and put it into the paving, then that's, as far as the culverts,
So that's 410, right? Because you got,
Minus the DRA money.
the DRA is 415, right?
We've already used some of it,
It'd be-
385. So 320 is what you'd have to move to paving or to move to wherever.
Okay.
So if you take the 705 off, you have 320 to work with. Is that what you're saying? Because you're taking out the receipt.
Right, so it's here at 705, the receipt side's 385 for the
Okay.
DRA money, so the difference is 320. So if
320.
we cover that 320 with bond
The
money, then
balance.
there'll be 320 to do.
Balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 320's, 320, it's better than,
That'll help cover some of these others that
bonds are
zeroed
just-
out.
yes.
how much difference do we have in the bonds with the projects that were submitted?
I have the bonds set for a beginning balance of 7.5.
7.5.
I mean, that
7.3.
320 is gonna,
I think it was 7.3 is what, is that, got, let's see, 7.3 was the total of the project.
7.3 was the total of all the projects, is that what you said?
I think so.
So 8.1 is what we put in there because it was the bond money, plus we put in the 900 of the Port Authority money into that account.
Yeah.
8187. 73, is that what you just said?
But you're saying 7.5 is all the bonds?
7.5 is just what I had projected as the beginning balance that we were not going to use before the end of this year, fiscal year.
What's the, what was the bond total that we got? 7.3, yeah. I want to make sure that we're talking about bond monies and not, because there's a lot of monies in that account when it comes to the investment dollars. So 705 has got the DRA and monies that we pulled from paving. So we can put those monies back in the paving and use bond monies for the boulevard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you're telling me to do.
But we gotta make sure we're using the 7.3.
Okay.
and that gives her 320 to work with, right? If we're
Right,
gonna
the
just
other
balance
places,
based
yeah.
on this assumption, that's 320.
Well, if you take the 7.3,
Well, I'm talking about just the 705 minus the DRA money, what she's saying to just take that off to balance, it would allow 320 to be put back into paving or culverts or whatever it is. I'm not talking about the bond, I'm just saying,
yes,
to balance this out.
yes.
Do you all have a directive of how you want that 320 split up?
Well, I think that's,
I mean, no, you can just
No,
tell me. I didn't know if
I
you wanted
think
to
you
stick it all
need
in
to-
paving or if you were wanting to
Yeah.
divide it among some of those other things you brought up.
No, I'm gonna have to divide it among the other things that were zeroed out.
yeah, I think
You
it's
just let me know.
how
Okay.
she tells us.
You all good?
I guess. I'm better.
You guys want to talk about the next fund?
Hang on a second.
Oh, nope.
I just want to make sure. I'm doing some- 7.3. So if the bonds are 7.3 and we're talking about using, I just want to make sure that we're not getting into the 7.3. That totals, all the projects total 7.3. So when we say we got, you put 7.5 in there, I just want to make sure that 7.3 of that projects were submitted specifically for those bonds. Does that make sense?
You need to check with bond counsel, is that what you are saying? Or are you just saying it's 7.3
Yeah.
total, it's not over, it doesn't go over that, it's not what you're saying?
Well, the 7.3 is committed to the projects that we submitted for the bonds. I just want to make sure that we're not making decisions where we're moving monies around that are going to tie into the 7.3. Because if we're tying into the 7.3, just because the language is in there, doesn't mean that the monies, they were already earmarked for projects.
When we brought the bond money in, we brought it in at 7.1 as the bond money. That's after, I guess, the fees and stuff. But as far as what's in here, you're asking about the 7.5 that I have as the beginning balance. That's not because it's anywhere else in the budget until we make this change. It's just from where we've already started those projects that you're talking about being 7.3, and we'll have paid some of them out of there by the end of the fiscal year.
I just know we were discussing pulling bond monies. I just want to make sure everybody knows that it's more 7.2 because of the bid that came in for the sewer and water was 2.4 million. So. Now, the difference of 705 and 220, the 320 that we're putting back in, just off my notes, what we've already gone through, we're looking at almost $300,000. I said putting that back into paving. You've got areas where parts and repairs, sign materials, road materials, building and repairing expenses, the safety kind of washes out. That's close to 300,000.
Yeah.
So those monies going to be filling those needs? Okay.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
And then if anything's left, we'll put it into paving, but
Yeah.
I feel like we need to fill those needs first.
Clear as mud?
I got it.
And I'll break it all down and send it to you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
We'll go into more detail on that. We got a lot of moving parts, I just want to make sure that we don't step on others.
Okay. The next one is the jail fund. As far as big glaring things that I can think of, I can't think of any. He did have a large amount in equipment that is zeroed out, and that's because he had planned on purchasing some kitchen equipment that needed to be replaced. Then he is doing that in this fiscal year, so he won't have to do anything like that next fiscal year. So that's one of the major changes there. When you review his salary schedule, you'll notice that he had an open position, full-time position. I think that we zeroed it out because it was empty at this time, and we have a hiring freeze, so just kind of keep that in mind when you're reviewing that document. Y'all have questions on that one? He didn't come in, did he? I'll skip over the grant fund, it's zeroed. The next one's 911. There's no grant equipment in there this year, that's budgeted. We can change that if they are awarded, any grants. And if we need to change that. I can't think of anything else that's glaring. We have tower leases in there that, was not in there last year. But questions on that one? All right, the occupational tax, of course, most of the receipts of that are budgeted as outgoing transfers. It's all shown on the receipt side of the budget. The only thing on the expense side really is, we always have an amount built in to refund occupational tax when people pay us incorrectly. And then we'll have some money left over in that investment account. I estimate it right now at $200,000. That's, that could change for the end of the year depending on what we're funding with it. But it's also shown as a receipt separately, so it washes itself out. If that changes, both sides will change. It won't unbalance the budget. And then the animal shelter donation account set at 30. We just put it all in one line in supplies, and we'll let them choose how they fund those items that we had reduced for this year. Okay. The next one is 79. That's the fund that we've made as a new fund for the sheriff's department. We have here broken out the sheriff's salary base pay because it's statutorily set. And then the rest of what we put into that expense budget, we just put as a bulk item. And that's so that we're not going through each line, picking which ones to reduce down to that. This is also set with the idea that the rest of the budget is, that there's the school resource officers that are a separate county agency. So that's reflecting on this budget as well, if that makes sense. And the way that number was come up with was it went back to 2016, I think it was. Yes, we went back to 2016 when the subsidy to the sheriff's office was $1 million. So it was actually under $1 million. It was $987,000. And then the year after that, it was 1.1-ish. The year after that, it was like 1.4-ish. As far as the subsidy of occupational tax. So we went back to that time, and that's how we came up with that expense figure. Go ahead and ask.
So obviously, that's a big amount. And so, what you're saying is you didn't come up with that amount based on anything from him.
No, it's just based on
It's
historical.
just based on,
Yes.
this is what we want to fund of your department, figure out how to do it.
Basically, yeah. So we went back and looked from 15 on. So in 14-15, which was the first year, the last year that we have data for before fee pooling, our subsidy was $404,000. but I've been told that that doesn't include fringe. I haven't been able to pull enough documents to verify that, but let's just say it doesn't include fringe benefits for salaries. And then the next year that we have a full year's worth of information for that 16-17. And in 16-17, the subsidy was 987. So 16-17 was before we started adding more school resource officers on. So since we took the resource officers off of this budget, we went back to that year subsidy to kind of mirror those same circumstances without school resource officers on the budget. And it was so that's 987. So that's how we came up with the 1 million subsidy.
I have no idea. This is the first time I've seen it, so I'll have to go back and start looking.
Yes,
Could've
and
sent me an
Eddie and I
email,
talked
let
after
me
the
know you
last
was gonna do
meeting.
that. I mean,
Yeah, Eddie and I talked after the last meeting when we had basically everything in yellow was kept and everything else
you
was
and I
zeroed
talked
out.
on the phone.
Yes, and I
That
have a
day
whole
I
list
shared
of
the
notes
budget
of
with
things that he said need to go back in. So
Now it's totally different.
now you
so.
have to decide, are you gonna put all those things back in? Are you gonna go with this model? I mean,
Yes.
I still have all that, so if it comes back up, I'm ready. It's in a document. I didn't lose any of it.
Well, I think that's in the 514 budget that you sent me, right? That, like, I mean, it's titled, you may not remember what it was titled,
Oh,
but
you're
it
talking
was
about the last budget.
514, like May dot.
Right, so I think the
14
last budget that was sent out was when we did that first reading, when everything, the only thing we kept were those bare minimum.
Yes.
The things we ended up doing as a yellow, saying this is what we have to operate, nobody's gonna really have anything to do.
Right. That's-
Material wise, like, kinda like Wendy was
Yeah.
talking about, yeah. So then from there, Eddie gave me a list of more that I did not have in yellow, and I've kept that, it's just not the way it's presented now.
Why?
I just want to bring up too, I mean, this, obviously, this is a request of increasing the subsidy, $967,000. This is in addition to what we've just laid out. Again, I think there's a misconception that the Marsh County Fiscal Court has a bucket of money. We don't.
I base those salaries off of 911's ordinance that you all approved
Here.
to go off the fees. It still doesn't meet those
That's right.
salaries that you all approved for the fee structure with the electric companies. And I base those fees a few dollars behind what Paducah had just gotten.
I'm just pointing out, I hear too often that the Marsh County Fiscal Court has a ton of money. And it gets to a point where we have to, show that, obviously, we just went through the road department, that's one department. We don't have, we have to work with the monies that we get. And at some point, we have to say, as elected officials, okay, how are we going to manage these monies? I mean, this is, to me, almost $1 million more than what we're already subsidizing. And you can go back and look at the previous years, how the office has been ran. And I think since I've been in office, the road department has been cut. They've tightened their belt. They've managed their budget. They're still providing the service to the citizens. I mean, every department has taken a cut. Economic development, we reduced as much as we could from that office and managed to get an industrial park. I mean, every office is feeling the pinch. This isn't a singling out the sheriff's department. Every one of these department heads in here, their budgets have been affected. And that's what I hope that we look at when we look at this budget, is how much monies we bring in and how we manage those monies going out. And this misconception that we just have a ton of monies up here, when we don't. We can manage the monies to where we can still provide that service to the taxpayers, but I'm sorry, but I want to draw a line when it comes to some of the departments. And, you know, when we start looking at what we're getting in return, you know, with the tax dollars, it doesn't matter if it's the road department, the maintenance department. I know my staff, we sit down and we say, okay, wait a minute, what are we doing here? That's my job when the fiscal court puts a budget in place to carry it out. And this fiscal court has stated as such. You want me to find where those monies come from. So I just point that out. We've got decisions to make, and it's affecting every one of these departments. And we're on a short timeline. We got a first reading tomorrow, and we have to have a second reading by the end of the month. Any suggestions where the court wants to pull these monies so that my staff knows where you want these monies pulled from?
I don't think we had any today that you need to balance tomorrow's first reading, do you?
No, not that I can recall.
But are there any suggestions?
What are you looking for me to come up with? How much money you want me to come up with?
I'm asking any suggestions where in the budget.
I want to see the actual current data on the receipts, and all we've seen so far is March 31st.
I can get that. Are you wanting receipts for just everything, or is there one thing in particular you're wanting more detailed data about?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see as current as possible. I mean, I don't guess I have anything beyond March 31st. You did email me the occupational tax number a couple weeks ago, the increase on that, but
Any suggestions?
Well, I'm going to sit down with Erica after this, and I mean, a couple of things. She and I talked just very short amount of time Friday about the carryover because we hadn't got this document before then. And so I want to be comfortable that that's not, I'm okay with being conservative, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to see that we're making all these cuts based on all conservatism and that it's truly $5 million when it's sitting at $2 million. So, and then I'll be honest, I'm still not comfortable yet with that OTA figure, and I know we had this discussion last year, and it bore out, I believe, but obviously we're in a different situation now than we've ever been. But I still, based on other counties and know enough about ours as well, I'm just not completely comfortable that it's going to be a 34% decrease. So that's where I am.
So if they're, the way it sounds is the OTA receipts, I mean, I know we talk about 31% being a conservative number going into an unknown, but would it be fair to say that that's where the court is looking to pull those monies, dropping that 31%?
I'm not speaking for the court. Speaking for myself.
Sure, okay. So,
But, you know,
what about,
I mean, expense-wise, where do you think, I mean, I don't have an answer for you of where to take it from an expense to another expense because it's not there. I mean, if that's the answer you're looking for me to say, which I know, you can tell me that, but
I come in.
when you do that, it
listen, I come
stops and
in.
lets me.
I come in, my staff, we put things on the table, okay? We need a dialogue from this court as far as what this budget is going to look like, not beating back and forth to me and my staff. We're doing our best to put a budget on the table. Now, is it conservative? Absolutely, because we've got an unknown going into this next fiscal year. But, I mean, tomorrow will be the June 2nd. It'll be the first reading of this budget. You know, we're doing our job to bring to the table a budget. We knew that it was not going to be well received. Never is a budget in preparations for what we're going into, is it going to be well received. But I feel it's our responsibility to put what we put in place. And obviously, we discussed the two main things, which was the OTA receipts and the cash balances being zero. That's the last time we met. So we have sat down. We've spent a lot of hours putting in this budget in front of the fiscal court. And when I ask for suggestions, I mean, that's what I'm asking, is suggestions. There's four of us, and that's what I'm asking. So that's when.
So let me ask you this then. You tell me, you know, you're on the PAC roll board, other stuff like that. You want me to completely give you an answer on this county police force when it was sent to me at 4:15 Friday, and you want me, this is enough discussion for me to wrap my head around that and make a decision today? You feel like that's fair? When you've put in, I don't know how much time you've put in on it, I get that. We've not talked about it, and I'm not degrading you for not talking to me about it, but I'm telling you that I don't think it's fair for you to expect that of me, quite honestly. So you can have that expectation if you'd like, but I don't think you would appreciate that if you were in my seat. I just don't.
When we have an issue that we're going to meet and discuss, I've asked this court, okay? If you go back and you look at the sanitation employee, when the court made a decision, but they didn't make a decision as where those monies get pulled from, brought it back to the court, and I said, do you want to find it or do you want me to find it? That's what my staff is here for. The court unanimously said, we want you to find it. Okay, I like to have clear and concise directions from this court, what you want me to do and my staff to do. So when we started looking at this, we dove into this. And if we're talking about the school resource officer, it's no hidden agenda. This has been out in the media. This has been publicized. It's been politicized. This is no hidden agenda. I haven't gotten one phone call. While we have been up here working, trying to figure this out, we've sat down and met with the sheriff and talked to him. You know, this has not been a hidden agenda. So the flip side to that coin is we come to a meeting to discuss this budget, and I'm asking this court, what do you want from me and my staff to carry out these duties? The fact that The only man in this room that has called me is this guy right here. Neither, you two don't call me. We're up here working. I can attest that my staff is working. My department heads are working. It's a two-way street. We have put a budget on the table. The last time we met as a fiscal court regarding this budget, those were the two items that we had discussed. 31% was even mentioned then with the OTA, that it was aggressive. We discussed that conservative, aggressive budget. You never reached out to me. I'm doing my job, carrying out what I get from the court, and I don't want this to be a tit for tat. We have a budget that has got to get balanced. That was the biggest important thing, was to have a budget that was balanced and not having zeros laid out in the cash balances. My staff did that. They put it together. Is there an option? I'm throwing options on the table. The whole school resource officer thing, that is an option to put on the table to where we can manage it to where the school gets the resource. The school, and I'll beat this drum, the school board is the one that should be hiring those resource officers. But that's not the case. We have a bureaucratic system in place that we've got three. You got a fee office, a fiscal court, and a school district, all elected officials that have to discuss a serious issue in our county when it comes to school safety. And it's here, it's in our lap. It shouldn't be, but it is. And we have to have these discussions. We have to figure this out. And if this is an option, or if there's another option, it's not personal. It's not anything emotional as far as what agency and what a fee office or a taxing government entity. It's about putting something on the table that is long-term, that is actually going to provide safety in our schools, and funding all the way up to the General Assembly. Funding is the key element. And honestly, the leaders that came together, that was the first time that the local leaders had come together to try to figure out, what can we do? You know, the cities need to participate if the school's not going to fund this. In my opinion, it was clear they didn't want to go that route. One of our mayors said this is bureaucracy at its best. That's not a quote, but he said get rid of the bureaucracy and the school take this initiative on like they should. And I don't want it to be a rift between our governing body, but it is a two-way street. We have been sitting up here putting these together. Y'all have been communicating to the treasurer. This was something that I came out and said that this is the most simplest thing that I can think of, is the school is going to put X amount of dollars on the table, then we put a plan on the table to where it covers it. Now, I put that out there as a plan. Is it the golden plan? Is it the plan that everybody's going to go with? No, but it's out there. I mean, you should know me by now. We have to have these discussions. Is it painful for some? Sure it is. But we have to have these discussions. And I think that we accomplished something today. You know, over $300,000 in the road department, we managed to move some monies to where we covered that. I mean, I just want to make sure that we don't lose the narrative of what we're trying to do here by taking something that is emotional to others with the way we've always done it. And that's what it is. It's just, this is the way we've always done it. And that is the only way that it can be done. And I totally disagree with that. And that's just my honest opinion. I lay it out there. I've always laid it out there. Do I get criticized? Absolutely. But I'm not going to change. That is my honest opinion. We can do better. And there's monies, obviously, that's what we're doing. We have to put a budget together. To criticize this, or my office, or this fiscal court, that it's about dollars, statutorily, we are required to put a budget together. We have to discuss dollars. We can't ignore that. So that's my rant for the day. And, you know, as we move forward, you know, we're working hard, my staff and I, to carry out what the court wants, but it is a two-way street as far as communication. Does anybody else want to say anything?
I do want to say, all the commissioners have contacted me with questions, and hopefully I've answered them the way you guys need them. And Monty says he's coming to meet today, that's great. If one of you other guys want to come too, that's fine. I know you can't have more than two of you at a time together, but any day you want to come, I'll block out the day and we can go over one by one, whatever you want. Any of the other days, I'm usually in there with these guys working on it, but I can block out a day anytime you guys want to come.
My door is open always for you guys. Anything else? All right.